They dragged her barefoot through the snow and told her to die quietly. No mate, no strength, no name worth speaking. Nyra Ashen was the Omega they'd fed last, beaten first, and finally thrown into a blizzard so the pack wouldn't have to watch her starve. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the winter killing them wasn't winter at all. And the girl bleeding in the snow was the only one alive who could prove it. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop the name of your city in the comments so I know where you're watching from tonight. The morning they decided to kill her, Nyra Ashen was scrubbing blood out of a wolfskin cloak that didn't belong to her. She was on her knees in the washing shed behind the Great Hall, and her fingers had gone the color of raw meat an hour ago. The water in the bucket wasn't really water anymore. It was a slurry of pink ice and grit, and every time she plunged the cloak back in, she had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from making a sound. Omegas who made sounds got noticed. Omegas who got noticed got hit. Outside, the wind was doing that thing again, that low, droning howl that sounded almost human if you listened too long. 3 winters back, Nyra had asked her mother what the wind was saying, and her mother had slapped her hard enough to split her lip and told her never to ask that question where anyone could hear. Her mother had been dead for 2 winters now, starved, like most of them. Nyra, the voice came from the doorway. Low, female, not kind. Nyra didn't turn around. You learned, in the Ashen Pack, not to turn around until you were told. Turning around was a thing the strong did. Omegas kept their eyes on the work. I said your name, girl. Yes, Luna Vesa. Look at me. Nyra turned. Vesa Thorn filled the doorway, broad in the shoulders, gray streaking her black braids, a face that had been beautiful once and now just looked carved. She was the Alpha King's sister, and for 12 years she had been the closest thing Nyra had to a guardian, if you could call it that. Vesa had never hit her. That was the extent of it. Leave the cloak, Vesa said. Council wants you. The bucket tipped. A little pink water ran across the boards. Nyra watched it go. Me, you. Why? Vesa's mouth did something complicated. Not a smile, not quite pity. Put your shoes on, Nyra. The good ones, if you still have them. She didn't have good ones. She had 1 pair, and the left sole was held to the upper with pine tar and a strip of gut string she'd stolen from the butchery in autumn. She put them on anyway. She followed Vesa out through the packed snow of the yard, past the skinning posts where the men had hung the last of the elk 2 weeks ago, and where now nothing hung but wind, past the smokehouse that had been cold since the solstice moon, past the long rows of lodges where the pack's warriors slept 4 and 5 to a bed to share heat. The Great Hall sat at the top of the rise. It was the only building in the valley that still had a real fire going, and you could smell the pine smoke from a long way off. And if you were hungry, and everyone was hungry, the smell could make you weep. Nyra did not weep. She hadn't wept since the night her brother Doran had been carried back from the hunt with his belly opened by a bear's claws, and even that she had cried in the dark, alone, with a fist shoved against her mouth. Vesa, she said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Don't. Just tell me if it's bad. Vesa stopped walking. For a moment she looked at Nyra the way she used to, back when Nyra was 7 and still small enough to ride on her hip, and there was something in her face that was almost an apology. It's bad, Vesa said. Keep your head down. Don't speak unless a crown speaks to you first. And Nyra, whatever Kaelor decides, don't argue. The Alpha King is going to decide something about me. The Alpha King is dying, Vesa said flatly, and dying men make fast decisions. Walk. The Great Hall had been built in a warmer age. Nyra had read that in one of the old bark scrolls in the midwife's hut before the midwife died, and her hut was stripped for firewood. Back when the pack had been rich, back when the rivers had run every season and the hunts had come home laden, the hall had been a place of feasting. Long tables, antler chandeliers, a fire pit in the center that roared tall enough to roast a whole stag. Now the tables were mostly gone, burned, and the antlers on the walls had been pried down and traded south for grain that never came, and the fire pit burned low and mean, feeding on split pine that sputtered and spat. The hall smelled of wet fur and old blood and the sour breath of 40 hungry warriors pretending they weren't hungry. They were all there. The council, the high betas, the two surviving pack mothers, the king's blades, in their black leather, standing in a half ring around the dais. And on the dais itself, on the old antler throne, sat Kalor Virex, Alpha King of the Ashen, and he was the sickest-looking man Nyra had ever seen who was still upright. He had been beautiful once. Everyone said so. The stories said Kalor Virex had been the kind of alpha poets wrote about. Tall, black-haired, gold-eyed, able to run down a bull moose on foot and put his hand flat against its throat without fear. Nyra had only ever known him from a distance. She had seen him at the solstice fires when she was 11, and she had thought then that he looked like a statue carved out of winter itself. The man on the throne now looked like a statue someone had left out in the rain. His skin had gone the color of old wax. The hollows under his eyes were so deep they cast their own shadows. His hands on the arms of the throne were a warrior's hands, huge, scarred, knuckled, but they were trembling, just slightly, and when Nyra saw the tremble, she understood fully, for the first time, what Vesa had been trying to tell her. The Alpha King was not just dying, he was going. "That's her?" somebody said. It was High Beta Meron. He was standing at the king's right elbow, and he had the kind of mouth that was always half smiling about something unpleasant. Meron had hit Nyra once when she was 9 for dropping a bowl of broth, and she had not forgotten the particular sound he made when he was about to enjoy himself. "That's the Ashen Runt?" "That's her," Vesa said. Meron whistled low. "Thorn, we brought you here to suggest strong blood, mating stock, a body the king could—" He glanced at the throne, careful, and corrected himself. "A body that could stand beside the king in the spring rites and draw strength back into the line. That is a scrap of rag with feet." "She's what's left," Vesa said. "Then the line is already dead." "Meron." Kalor's voice. It came out thinner than Nyra had expected. A man's voice, not a king's. "Let the girl stand where I can see her." One of the blades put a hand on Nyra's shoulder and pushed her forward, not roughly but not gently either, until she was 6 paces from the dais. She kept her eyes down, the way Vesa had told her. She could see the king's boots. Wolfskin. Very old. One of the laces was broken and knotted. "Look up, girl." She looked up. Gold eyes. That was the only thing left of the statue. The eyes were exactly what the stories said. They caught the low firelight and held it, and for a second Nyra forgot to be afraid and just looked. Kalor Virex looked back. "What's your name?" "Nyra, sire. Nyra Ashen." "Ashen's a pack name. What was your mother?" "Orla of Sleet Creek, sire." "Orla." He said it like he was tasting the word, trying to place it. "The herb wife. Died the winter the deer came back wrong." "Yes, sire." "Your father?" "I don't have one, sire." A small, ugly snort from Meron. The king's eyes flicked to him, and the snort stopped. "No mate bond?" Kalor asked her. "No match in the pack? Nothing tugs?" "No, sire." "How old are you?" 19. "And nothing." He leaned back in the antler throne. The throne creaked. 19 and nothing. Every wolf of age in this hall has felt the pull toward someone, even if it came to nothing. And you're telling me the bond has never once moved in you? "No, sire." "Then what in the name of my fathers are you for?" She didn't mean to answer. She had been told explicitly not to answer unless asked, and she wasn't sure if that had been a question or just a man dying out loud. But her mouth opened anyway, and what came out was, "I don't know, sire." The hall got very quiet. Meron laughed, a single dry bark of a laugh. "There it is. Out of her own mouth. She doesn't know. An omega without a mate, without a gift, without so much as a strong arm on her. Sire, we are wasting fire heat on this." Meron, "No, sire. With respect, we have 300 mouths in this valley and grain for 30. We have warriors eating their own belts. The long winter is in its 4th year, and there has been no break, no thaw, no—" His voice cracked for half a heartbeat, and Nyra realized with a small shock that High Beta Meron was frightened, actually frightened, and was covering it with cruelty the way some men cover a wound with a dirty rag. "Sire, we cannot keep carrying the weightless." "Say what you mean, Meron." "Cast her out." The word landed in the hall like a stone dropped down a well. Nyra heard it hit. She heard it echo. She felt, absurdly, a kind of calm come over her because she had been waiting for this word for most of her life. And now that it was finally in the air, she didn't have to dread it anymore. "She's 19 summers and she has produced nothing for this pack," Marin said, his voice gathering momentum. "No pups, no game, no healing, no weaving worth the thread. She is a pair of hands that can scrub, and we have plenty of hands. Sire, by the old law, an unmated Omega past her 19th summer who cannot prove value may be returned to the wild. It is in the law. You signed it yourself." "I signed a lot of laws, Marin." "Then let this one speak for itself." Kaler was silent. The firelight moved over his wasted face and made the hollows deeper. Nyra watched him. She had the strangest feeling, watching him, that he wasn't really listening to Marin at all. He was listening to something else. Something under the floor, maybe. Something under the valley. "Sire," Vesa said from behind Nyra's shoulder. Her voice was careful, low. "She is my kin. Distant, but kin. If she must go, let her go as a woman of the thorn line, not a discard. Let her take a knife. Let her take a flint." "Thorn," Marin said. "You've always been sentimental." "Thorn," Kaler said, "is the only person in this hall still telling me the truth, so shut your mouth, Marin." Marin shut his mouth. Kaler looked at Nyra again. His gold eyes had gone tired. It occurred to her, and this was so strange a thought that it almost made her laugh out loud, that he was looking at her the way a man looks at something he's about to lose, not the way a king looks at something he's about to throw away. "Nyra Ashen," he said, "daughter of Orla, do you understand what's being asked of this hall?" "Yes, sire." "Say it." "You're asked to decide whether I'm worth the bread to keep." Somebody down the hall made a small, involuntary noise. A woman's voice. Nyra didn't look to see who. "And what do you say to that, Nyra Ashen?" She thought about it. She could feel Vesa behind her, rigid with the unsaid command. "Don't argue, don't argue, don't argue." She could feel Marin smirk without needing to see it. She could feel the fire. She could feel the stone under her bad shoe. "I say," she heard herself say, "that I'd rather be asked that in a year when the pack was fed." Silence again. But a different silence this time. A silence with teeth in it. "Because," Nyra went on, and now something was happening in her chest. Some kind of slow, steady pressure that wasn't fear and wasn't anger and wasn't courage, but had a little of all three. "In a fed pack, you'd measure me by weaving and washing and whether I can hold a babe without dropping it. In a starving pack, you measure me by whether I can feed you, and I can't, sire. So by that measure I fail. I know I fail. I'm not arguing that." "Then what?" said Marin, dangerous. "Are you arguing, girl?" "I'm arguing that the measure is wrong." Nobody moved. "The winter is wrong," Nyra said, and her voice was shaking now, but she couldn't stop it, because the thing in her chest had decided it was going to come out whether she wanted it to or not. "The winter is wrong, and we're all pretending it isn't. And we're eating each other out of the valley one Omega at a time, because nobody wants to say out loud that a winter doesn't last 4 years by itself. My mother knew. She—" Silence. That was Marin. He had stepped down off the dais. His hand was on the hilt of his knife. "Let her speak," Kaler said. "Sire." "Let her speak!" Nyra's knees were shaking. She locked them. "My mother," she said, "was an herb wife. Before she died, she wrote things down. On bark. She hid them in a tin under the floor of the birthing hut. And when the hut burned last spring, I went and I dug the tin out of the ash and I kept it. I've read them. All of them. Over and over. Sire, there's a word in them. A word I don't know how to say out loud because in this pack we don't say it. But it's the word for what's happening to us. Say the word, girl." She looked at the Alpha King's face. She looked at the gray of his skin. She looked at his trembling hands on the arms of the throne. "Hollow binding," she said. The sound the hall made then was not a sound she had words for. It was as if every person in the room had breathed in at the same time and forgotten to breathe out. A pack mother, old Ilva, pressed both hands over her mouth. One of the king's blades made a warding sign against his chest. The old one. The one you weren't supposed to make in a hall that called itself civilized. Marin's knife was half out of its sheath. "Sire," Marin said, and his voice had gone white. "Sire, this is This is exactly why. This is superstition. This is the old rot. This is why the Omegas have to be Meron. She's invoking a Meron. The king's voice, when he finally put weight into it, was the voice from the stories. Not loud, just full. It rolled through the hall and pressed everyone's shoulders down an inch, and Meron's knife slid back into its sheath as if it were ashamed of itself. Kaler sat a long moment. His chest rose and fell. Each breath looked like work. "Leave us," he said. Nobody moved. "I said leave us. All of you. Out. Blades at the door. Thorn, you stay. And the girl stays. Everyone else, out of my hall." They went. They didn't want to go, and Marin in particular stood in the doorway a moment too long, staring back at Nyra with an expression that said very clearly, "We are not finished, you and I." But they went. The heavy doors shut with a boom that shook snow from the rafters. The great hall was suddenly much larger and much colder. Kalor Virex looked at Nyra the way she had not been looked at, ever, by any living person. "Come closer, girl." She came closer, 2 paces, 3. She could smell him now. The sour, sweet, wrong smell of a body eating itself. "You know what hollow binding is. I know what my mother wrote." "Tell me what she wrote." Nyra swallowed. Her mouth was very dry. "She wrote that a pack can be cursed through its king. She wrote that if a king takes a blood oath with a thing he shouldn't take one with. A thing in the ground, a thing in the old stones, a thing from the cold places under the mountains, then the bond doesn't just bind him. It binds everyone under his howl, his warriors, his hunters, his women, the land itself. She wrote that the binding feeds on strength. The stronger the wolf, the faster the bond eats them. That's why our best hunters are the sickest. That's why—" She made herself look at him. "That's why you're dying, sire. The strongest of us is the first course." Kalor was very still. "And the winter?" he said softly. "The winter is what leaks out when a bond like that is alive in the land. The cold isn't weather, sire, it's hunger. The mountain is hungry, and what's under it is hungry, and we're what it's eating." Bessa, behind her, let out a long, shaking breath. "Kalor?" Bessa said. "Kalor, oh no." "Thorn. Kalor, what did you do?" The Alpha King did not answer his sister. He looked at Nyra instead, and in his gold eyes there was something that Nyra, who had been beaten and starved and insulted and finally called worthless in front of 40 warriors, had never in her life expected to see from a king. Shame. "How old were you," he said, "when your mother died?" 12. "Did she tell you what the pack did that winter?" "No, sire." "Did she tell you what I did?" "No, sire." He nodded slowly. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was water in them, and he did not bother to blink it away. "Go back to your shed, Nyra Ashen," he said. "Finish the cloak. Sleep. I'll send for you at moonrise." "Sire." "Go." Dumb. She did not finish the cloak. She went back to the shed. She sat on the bench. She stared at the pink water in the bucket for what felt like a very long time. And slowly, very slowly, the shake started in her hands and moved up into her arms and then into her whole body, and she sat on the bench in the cold washing shed with her teeth clacking and no sound coming out of her mouth at all. She had said hollow binding in the great hall. She had said it out loud, to the king. Her mother had once caught her whispering the word to herself, tracing it on the bark scroll, and had taken her by both arms and shaken her hard enough to snap her head. "You never say that word out loud, Nyra, not even alone, not even asleep. You don't know what's under this valley. You don't know what it can hear." Nyra had just said it to a room of 40 people. She laughed once, a short, sick laugh, and then she put her face in her hands. The shed door banged open. She jerked her head up. Marin stood in the doorway with 2 men behind him. Not Blades, his own. 3 winters ago, Marin had picked 6 warriors out of the pack and made them his, fed them better, armed them better, and everyone knew it, and nobody said anything because the Alpha King was sick and Marin was not. "Get up," Marin said. The king said, "The king's asleep. Get up." She got up. Her legs didn't want to carry her, but they did. Marin didn't touch her. He didn't have to. One of the men behind him, a broad-faced boy she'd grown up with, Hale, who had once given her half a honeycomb behind the goat pen when they were both 8, stepped around her and put his hand flat against her back and pushed her out of the shed into the yard. She wouldn't remember later whether Hale would look at her. She thought, a long time afterward, that he did not. "Marin," she said. The cold hit her in the lungs like a fist. "Marin, the king said moonrise." "The king," Marin said, walking beside her through the snow, "is making a mistake. And when a king makes a mistake, a high beta's job is to make sure the mistake doesn't cost the pack. You'll understand, one day, if you live long enough. He wants me alive. I want the pack alive, different goal." They walked her out through the north gate. The warriors at the gate saw them coming and turned their faces away. And one of them, an older man with a gray beard, Olin, who had known her mother, made a small warding sign against his chest as she passed. He didn't meet her eyes either. Nobody did. The snow past the gate was knee-deep in the drifts and thigh-deep in the troughs. Maron walked her for a long time. The trees closed up around them. The pines were so heavy with frozen snow that their branches bowed almost to the ground, and the whole forest made a creaking, groaning sound, like an old ship on bad water. Finally, Maron stopped. They were in a little hollow between 3 black pines. The wind was less here. That was maybe the only kindness in any of it. "Here," he said. "Here what?" "Here is where you stay. Sit down." "Marin, sit down." She sat. The snow came up around her hips. Marin crouched in front of her. He was close enough that she could see the broken red veins in the whites of his eyes, could smell the boiled leather of his jerkin, could feel the heat coming off him, because he, at least, had eaten this morning. "I'm not going to cut your throat, girl," he said, almost gently. "I'm not that man. Some would say I should be, but I won't hang your blood on the pack. The pack's carrying enough." "Then take me back." "No." "Marin, the king?" "The king," Marin said, "loved your mother." The word landed like a stone at the bottom of a frozen lake. Something deep cracked under it. "What?" "You heard me. He loved Orla. Before he was king. Before any of it. And Orla told him things she should not have told an alpha with an ambition in him, and he did things with those things that he should not have done. And you..." He tapped the front of her chest with one gloved finger, not hard. "You are the only thing left walking around that remembers any of it. That's why Thorn kept you alive this long. That's why he let you speak. That's why I cannot let you sleep under his roof one more night." Nyra couldn't breathe. "You're lying." "Am I?" "My mother." "Your mother," Marin said, and for 1 second his face did something almost sad, "was the best of us, girl. And she died because of him. And so will you, one way or another, and I'd rather it be the cold than the thing under the mountain. Sit still, don't walk. You walk, you'll freeze faster. Sit. Lean against the tree. It'll be gentle. It's already gentle." He stood up. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm sorry you were born into this." He turned. He walked. The 2 men followed him. Their boot prints filled slowly behind them as the wind pushed snow across the trail. Nyra sat in the hollow between the 3 black pines, and for a long time she did not move. It got dark fast. She didn't remember the sun setting. She remembered that one moment there was a gray sort of daylight filtering down through the frozen pines, and the next moment there was a blue, and the next moment the blue was purple. And then she was sitting in the dark with her own breath fogging her face. Her feet had stopped hurting. That was the part she remembered most clearly, later. Her feet had been screaming all afternoon, and at some point in the purple hour they had just stopped, and a distant, far-off part of her brain noted that this was very bad, and a closer part of her brain told the distant part to shut up. She thought about her mother. She thought about the tin under the burned hut. She had sewn the bark scrolls into the lining of her underdress 2 winters ago, because she had learned by the time she was 15 that if you cared about something in the Ashen pack, you hid it on your body, or you lost it. She could feel them now, through the cloth, pressing against her skin, cold, thin, real. She thought, he loved my mother. She thought, the strongest of us is the first course. She thought, I am not going to die in a snowbank because Mayron Beta was afraid of a word. She pushed herself up. Her legs buckled. She went down on one knee. She pushed up again. She went down on both knees. On the third try, she got upright and stayed there, swaying, with one hand flat against the black pine. The moon was coming up. She could see it through the branches, just the first pale curve of it, a shaving of bone. It wouldn't be full tonight. Not yet. Nyra's mother had taught her to read the moon the way some girls were taught to read faces, and this moon, this rising bone curve, was 3 nights off full. 3 nights. Her mother's scrolls had said, in the part about hollow binding, that the only night you could unbind was the night the moon was whole. The pack cannot be made whole on a broken face. 3 nights to stay alive in a forest that was already killing the pack's best hunters, with no food, no fire, no knife, and feet she could no longer feel. She laughed, came out cracked. "All right," she said, out loud, to the trees, to the moon, to her dead mother, to whatever was listening under the stones. All right, all right. She started walking. She didn't walk toward the gate. She knew, even in the state she was in, that if Marin saw her come back through the gate, he would kill her with his own hands and tell the king a story about it afterward. She walked east. East was the ridge. East was the old goat path her brother Doran had used, back when he was alive, to bring the herd up in summer. East was also, if you knew where to look, the overhang where her mother had taken her once, when she was 7, and had shown her a small dark cleft in the rock, and had told her this is where you come if the pack is ever not a home anymore. Nyra had thought, at 7, that this was a strange thing for a mother to say. She did not think it was strange anymore. It took her 2 hours, maybe 3. She lost the thread of time. Twice she fell and had to crawl. Once she put her hand on a branch to steady herself, and a sheet of frozen snow slid off the branch and down the back of her neck and inside her dress, and she screamed, actually screamed, a short, raw sound that the forest ate up immediately. Nothing answered. That was somehow worse. The overhang was where she remembered. The cleft was narrower than she remembered, because she was bigger, but she got in. She got in and she pulled herself back as far as she could go, and she lay on the cold stone and shook. There was no fire. There was no food. There was only the stone, and the wind outside the cleft making a sound like a woman trying to pray through her teeth, and Nyra Ashen, 19 summers old, with bark scrolls sewn into her underdress, and her feet gone numb to the ankles, and her mother's word, hollow binding, banging around in her skull like a bell. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She could not afford to sleep. Her mother's scrolls had said a wolf who slept in this kind of cold did not wake, and Nyra had too many things she still needed to do awake. She lay in the dark. She listened. And after a long time, an hour, 2, she began to hear it. A sound in the rock. It was very faint. It was so faint that at first she thought it was her own pulse, because a pulse in that kind of cold turns into a drum in your own ears. But it wasn't her pulse. Her pulse was fast. This was slow, very slow, slower than a sleeping man's heart. It came from somewhere under the cleft, somewhere deep under the overhang, somewhere under the whole ridge, and it was a sound she could almost put a word to. Breathing. Something under the mountain was breathing. And as Nyra Ashen lay on the stone with her numb feet, and her mother's scrolls against her skin, and her king's shame still burning in her eyes from the great hall, she understood, for the first time in her life, with a clarity that was almost relief, exactly what her mother had died trying to tell her. The winter was not weather. The winter was a mouth, and it was about to open. Outside the cleft, the wind dropped. It dropped so suddenly that Nyra's ears popped. The howling, the groaning of frozen pines, the creak of snow settling on bough. All of it stopped, all at once, the way a room goes silent when someone important walks in. And in the silence, very far off, down the slope, from the direction of the ashen packhold, Nyra heard a horn, a long, low, hunting horn. Not one of the pack's horns. She knew all of those. This one was deeper, older. It had a wrongness in it, a note under the note, and the hair on the back of her neck stood straight up against her numb skin. Someone was hunting in the Ashen Valley tonight who did not belong to the Ashen Valley. And a moment later, from much closer, from above the overhang, on the ridge, maybe 40 paces from where she was lying, she heard the soft, careful, deliberate crunch of a very large paw pressing down into old snow. Once, twice, then stopping, as if listening for her. Nyra Ashen, Omega, outcast, unmated, worthless, pressed herself back against the stone at the very back of the cleft and put one hand flat against her chest where the bark scrolls lay, and did not breathe. The paw pressed once more and then a third time, and then, worse, it stopped pressing at all. Nyra understood the stopping. Her mother had taught her that, long before she had taught her words from books. When a wolf goes quiet in the snow, it's already decided what it's going to do. A walking wolf is a thinking wolf. A still one is a wolf that has already thought. She could hear her own heart now. It was louder than the breathing under the stone. It was so loud she was certain the thing on the ridge could hear it too. She tried to slow it down. She tried the old trick her mother had used on laboring women, the long breath in, the longer breath out. Her lungs refused. Her lungs did not care about tricks. Her lungs had decided they were going to do whatever the cold told them to do, and she was not invited to the conversation. The horn sounded again, down the valley. Nearer this time. It was the kind of sound that sank into your bones and rearranged them. Nyra had never heard anything like it, and at the same time she had the strangest feeling that she had heard it all her life, that it had been underneath everything since she was a child, under every lullaby and every winter wind, and only now was it loud enough to be called a sound. And then, above her, a second paw print joined the first, not alongside it, behind it. Whatever was up on the ridge was not alone. She closed her eyes. She made herself very small in the cleft. She pressed her forehead against the cold stone, and she tried, for one absurd second, to pretend she was 7 again and hiding from her brother in the linen chest at the back of the weavery, with Doran laughing in the next room and the whole afternoon smelling of cedar. The paws above her moved. They did not come down toward the overhang. They moved away, along the ridge, toward the sound of the horn. One set, then the other. The crunch of heavy weight on old crust, deliberate and unhurried, the sound of something that had all night and was not interested in anything as cheap as a scared girl in a crack in the rock. When the sound of the paws had gone, Nyra discovered she was crying. Not loudly. The kind of crying that just happens to your face without your permission. A slow, steady leak that froze almost as soon as it got past her lashes. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand and the wiping hurt, and she was glad for the hurt because it meant she still had a hand. She did not go to sleep. She had promised herself she would not go to sleep, but somewhere in the long second half of that night, she stopped being able to tell what was sleep and what wasn't. And in that gray place between the two, she saw her mother, very clearly, leaning over the bed where she was lying as a child with fever, pressing a cloth against her forehead and saying, in the quiet, no-nonsense voice she had used for everything, "Listen to me, Nyra. You are not a small thing. They're going to tell you that you are a small thing. Do not let them tell you for long." She came back to herself, shivering so hard her teeth were cutting the inside of her lip, to a gray streak of dawn crawling into the mouth of the cleft. She was alive. She had not expected to be alive. For a long moment she simply lay there and stared at the gray light and tried to decide what to do with the fact of it. Being alive at dawn meant she had to do something. Being dead would have been simpler. Being dead did not ask questions about how to stand up on feet you couldn't feel, or how to find food when the whole valley had been stripped bare by 4 years of a winter that wasn't a winter. She rolled onto her side, then onto her belly. Then, on her hands and knees, she crawled out of the cleft into the open air. The forest had changed in the night. She couldn't have said how at first. The light was the same dirty gray. The pines were the same bowed black. The snow was the same snow. But something had walked through this part of the world after dark, and the world knew. The birds had not started. There were no birds. Not a jay, not a crossbill, not even the distant rattle of a woodpecker. Even in the worst winters of her childhood, there had been birds somewhere. This morning, nothing. She pulled herself upright against a pine. Her feet came back to her in pieces. Ankles first, a dull, cold ache. Then the arches, screaming. Then the toes. And the toes were the worst, because 3 of them on her right foot did not come back at all. And when she looked down at the ruined leather of her shoe, she did not want to take it off to see what was under it. Not yet. Later, when she could do something about it. Or not. She walked. She walked because her mother had taught her that in this kind of cold walking was the only thing between you and the end. And because she was 19 and had been told she was worthless, and had decided sometime in the night between the first paw print and the second that she was not going to give Mayron the satisfaction of being right. She went east along the ridge, keeping low, keeping inside the tree line, because she did not want to meet again whatever had walked above her head. The horn had not sounded again since the first hour. That was worse than if it had. A horn that stopped was a horn that had found what it was looking for. By the time the sun was a pale smear behind the clouds, she guessed late morning, though the light was so sick it was hard to tell. She had come down off the ridge into a lower fold of the forest, where an old slide had torn a scar out of the slope. The scar was bad to cross. It was full of broken rock under soft snow, the kind of footing that breaks ankles. But she crossed it because on the far side of the scar, half covered, half forgotten, was a trapper's lean-to she and Doran had used one summer when they were children, and the pack had still let children go up the slope alone. The lean-to was still there, 3 walls of split pine and a slumped roof of bark. Someone had used it recently. There was a fire ring with old ash in it and a scrap of rabbit fur frozen to the stone. Not recent enough to matter to her. Whoever had been here was long gone. She pushed in, collapsed onto the packed earth, and for the first time since the washing shed allowed herself a minute where she did not have to be brave. She cried for maybe a count of 20. Then she stopped. 20 was all she could afford. She ate snow for water. She had learned young that eating snow too fast will make you colder, not warmer, so she took it in small mouthfuls and held it in her cheeks. She took off her right shoe. She made herself look. 2 of the 3 toes she had worried about were white and waxen, the color of tallow, but the skin had not split yet. One was gray-black at the tip, and she knew that one was not coming back. She could live with 1 toe. She put the shoe back on. She took the bark scrolls out of the lining of her underdress. Her mother had written on strips of inner birch bark, dried and pressed flat, tied with sinew. The ink was mostly boiled down elderberry mixed with a little iron shaving, the kind of ink you made when you had no money and no permission to be writing anything down at all. The script was small and slanted and occasionally crossed itself when the bark had warped in her hand. Nyra had read all of it so many times she could have written it out herself from memory, but reading it again in the gray lean-to, alone, with whatever was under the ridge still breathing somewhere below her feet, felt different. There was the recipe she had told the king about, for the breaking of a hollow binding. Her mother had written it small, as if small writing might keep it hidden from the reader who was not supposed to read it. The bones of a wolf who had died unmated, the inner bark of a pine that had been struck by lightning and lived, a handful of earth from under a threshold where a woman had died in childbed, the heart's blood of the one bound, meaning the king, or failing that, the blood of a kinsman, salt, a full moon, an Omega's hand to mix it, because the mixing required a wolf whose bond had never been given away. They do not know, my daughter, how much power sits in what they throw out. The ones without mates carry a whole bond inside them, unspent. It is a full cup. They call it empty because they cannot drink from it. Nyra read that line 3 times. Her eyes burned. Her mother had written on the last scroll in a hand that was shakier than the rest, as if she had written it in a hurry or in fear. If you are reading this and I am gone, do not go to Kalor first. Go to his sister. Vesa will know. Vesa was there when the oath was made. Vesa tried to stop him. Nyra sat with the scroll in her lap for a long moment. Then she began slowly and methodically to think. She had the recipe. She did not have the materials. She did not have a dead unmated wolf, or lightning-struck pine, or threshold earth, or the king's blood, or salt. She had bark. She had snow. She had 3.5 usable toes and a body that had been given nothing but thin broth for 3 days. What she did have, she realized, was information. And information, in a starving pack with a dying king, was a kind of food. She stayed in the lean-to until the light started to fail again. She did not build a fire, because a fire would bring whatever was on the ridge and whatever was blowing the horn, and she was not yet ready to find out what either of those things wanted from her. She chewed strips of the inner bark of a young pine she had peeled with her fingernails. It was bitter and resinous, and it stuck to her teeth. But her mother had told her once, long ago, that a wolf who couldn't hunt could keep herself walking on pine bark for 3 days if she had to. Nyra had no way of knowing if that was true. She was, she reflected, about to find out. When the gray turned blue, she left the lean-to and started down. She did not go toward the Ashen Gate. She went below it, along the frozen creek that ran along the south edge of the valley, keeping the pack hold between herself and the wind. She had a plan now, or the early bones of one, and the plan had 3 parts and all 3 were bad. First, she had to reach Vesa. Second, she had to not be seen by Mayron or any man who answered to Mayron. Third, she had to do it before the full moon 3 nights out, because after that, according to her mother's script, the recipe would not work until another full turn of the season, and by then there would be no pack left to save. The snow along the creek was windblown and hard, which was a mercy. She left shallower prints. Twice she heard men's voices up on the slope above her, patrols maybe, warriors looking for something, and she dropped flat into the snow and lay with her mouth open against the crust so the fog of her breath would not rise. The second time she heard one of them say, quite clearly, "The beta's taking this serious, eh? Like the runt was someone." And the other man laughed a short, uneasy laugh and said, "Shut up and walk." So he was looking for her. Mayron had sent men. That meant Mayron did not entirely believe the forest would take her, or did not entirely trust that the king would not ask, in the morning, where she was. That was useful. A man who half expected her to come back was a man who was already afraid. It took her most of the night to work her way around the south of the packhold, and by the time she was crouched behind the sheepfold on the far side, she was not going to be able to keep her feet much longer. She had passed the point where cold was painful and was into the point where it was peaceful, which she knew, from her mother, was not peace at all, but the body lying to her. The sheepfold was empty. There had not been sheep in the Ashen Valley for 2 winters, but the low stone wall of it was still there, and in the lee of it the wind could not reach her, and she sat against the stone and made herself count to 100, and then stood up and kept going. Vesa Thorn did not sleep in the great hall. She had her own longhouse, a smaller one, up the slope behind the smokehouse. Nyra had been there once as a child, carrying a bundle of herbs her mother had sent. She remembered a red-painted door and a pair of antlers nailed above it, smaller than the ones in the hall. A yearling's. The antlers were still there. The red paint had gone mostly gray. The door was shut. Nyra did not knock. Knocking was something a guest did. She was, she understood, something else. She scraped her nails against the wood, 3 short strokes. Her mother had taught her that signal a long time ago, though her mother had never said who it was for. Nyra had a guess now. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened 4 inches. Vesa Thorn's face appeared in the gap, lit from behind by a single fat lamp. Her braids were undone. She was holding a knife in her left hand, low, out of sight from anyone who might be watching the door. When she saw Nyra, her face did something Nyra had never seen it do before. It broke, briefly, into an expression that was so unguarded and so close to joy that Nyra almost put a hand out to steady her. Then Vesa's face closed again, and she stepped back and she said very quietly, "Inside. Fast. Now." Nyra stumbled in. Vesa bolted the door behind her and then turned and caught her as her knees went, and for a few long breaths they simply stood there in the little longhouse, the old woman holding up the frozen girl. "You stupid, stupid, stupid child," Vesa whispered into her hair. "You beautiful, stupid child. Mayron, I know what Mayron did. I'll deal with Mayron. Not tonight. Sit. By the fire. No, closer. Not that close. Your feet." There was broth. Real broth, with a little marrow grease floating on the top of it. Vesa did not ask where Nyra had been. She did not ask what had happened in the night. She fed her like you would feed a small child who had come in from something you were not ready to hear about, a spoon at a time, waiting between spoons. "The king's worse," Vesa said when the bowl was half empty. "Since you left the hall. He went back to his chamber and he hasn't stood up. He doesn't eat. He won't let anyone in but me and the blades. The pack is scared, Nyra. Scared pack is a dangerous pack. Mayron has already been in the hall twice today, talking to the betas, talking to the warriors, looking very much like a man who is preparing to step into a space that is not yet empty. He told me," Nyra said, "that Kalor loved my mother." Vesa closed her eyes. "Is it true?" "Yes." "All of it?" "All of it." Vesa opened her eyes again. They were wet. "Your mother was the smartest woman I have ever known. Kalor was the strongest. Those 2 things do not always love each other well, but in their case they did for a while. Before he was king, before he swore what he swore." "Tell me what he swore." Vesa was quiet. Vesa, tell me. We were losing a war. She said it flat, without decoration. Nyra waited. Before you were born, before your mother and Kalor were anything to each other, the Ashen Pack was losing a border war with the Tarn, who had 3 times our warriors and twice our meat, and we were going to be overrun before the turn of that year. Kalor's father had just died. He was 23 years old. He was crowned in a hall that smelled of his father's blood. And a man came to him, a man from over the East Peaks, a man I will not name in my own house. And that man told Kalor that there was a power sleeping in the root of our mountain that could be woken, and that if Kalor woke it, the Tarn would never cross our line again. Well, then, he woke it. He woke it. How? Blood oath. His own. And a second one, which I will not speak of, and which I tried to stop, and which he did anyway because he was 23 years old and his father was dead, and he could not bear to be the king who lost the valley. What did it cost him? Vesa's mouth twisted. At first, nothing. The Tarn broke against our line that spring, and they have not crossed again in 26 years. The pack was saved. Kalor was a hero who slept badly and grew quieter, and who one spring, 7 years later, met a young herb wife named Orla of Sleet Creek and allowed himself for a short while to be a man and not a king. That was you, Nyra. That was why you have his eyes, though nobody in the pack was allowed to say it. Your mother wouldn't have him. She said, Vesa's voice caught. She said, I will not marry a man who has a mouth under his feet. I will not feed that mouth my children. She knew. She always knew. Nyra could not speak. She kept you. She raised you alone, and when Kalor sent gifts, she burned them in the stove and told him to stop, and eventually he stopped. And the winters got worse. Every year, a little worse. You were a child. You did not notice how the hunts kept failing, how the strongest wolves kept sickening first. The pack noticed. Kalor noticed. And 5 winters ago he came to me, in this longhouse, and he sat in that chair where you are sitting, and he said, Vesa, what have I done? And you said, I said, brother, you have fed it. Nyra looked at her hands. Her hands were her mother's hands, long-fingered, slightly crooked at the little finger. She had never, until this moment, thought about whose blood had given her the gold in her eyes. He knew, she said. In the hall, when I said hollow binding, he knew. He has known for 20 years that it was hollow binding, Vesa said. He did not know there was a way out. Nobody in this pack knew there was a way out. Your mother was the only one who ever tried to find one, and she died trying. And she died hiding what she had found, because she believed, and I believe, that if Marin or any of his kind had gotten hold of the recipe, they would have used it wrong. They would have used it as a weapon. Your mother wanted it used as a key. The recipe needs his blood, Nyra said. Vesa nodded slowly. And a full moon. Yes. And an Omega's hand. Yes. Which he sent me to die in a snowbank over. Vesa flinched. He did not send you, she said. He sent you back to your shed. He was going to call for you at moonrise. Marin moved before he could. That is on Marin, not on Kalor. It is on both of them, Nyra said, and her own voice surprised her because it came out hard, flat, the voice of a woman twice her age. He let a man like Marin stand at his right hand while he was dying. That is on him. I'm not going to stand in this longhouse and pretend a dying king is a clean one. He made me out of a moment he wasn't brave enough to live with, and he let this pack half-starve for 20 years. And if I save him, I am not going to save him because he deserves saving. I am going to save him because there are 300 people in this valley who did not make his choices and do not deserve to die for them. Vesa looked at her for a long, long time. Your mother, she said finally, would have been proud of that sentence. They were quiet. The fat lamp guttered. Outside somewhere a dog made a sound that was not quite a bark. Vesa, Nyra said, I have 3 nights, less. I need things. Tell me. Bones of an unmated wolf who died. I have them. Nyra looked up sharply. I have them, Vesa said. Your mother gave them to me the month before she died. She told me to keep them for you and to not ask. I did not ask. They are under the floor of this house, in a leather bag, and they have been waiting for you for 7 winters. Lightning struck pine. The old pine on the east rise. The one the children are told not to climb. I can get the inner bark tonight. I will get it myself. Earth from under a threshold where a woman died in childbed. Vesa went still. That will be your mother, she said quietly. She died under her own door. It was midsummer. Your brother carried her in from the birthing hut, and she did not make it past the step. I was there. I know the exact stone. I can't. You won't have to. I will. Tonight. Salt. I have salt. Nyra swallowed. And the king's blood. Vesa said nothing for a moment. Then she said very carefully, that one you will have to get yourself. He will give it to you, Nyra. If you ask him on your feet, in front of the hall, where Mayron cannot arrange a knife in the dark, he will give it to you. He is a broken man, but he is not a coward. He never was. Mayron will not let me near him. Mayron, Vesa said, is going to have a very hard morning. They talked until the lamp started to fail. Vesa gave her dry stockings, a pair of her own winter boots, too big, but felt-lined and good, an old fur cloak, and a small hunting knife, plain, unadorned, the kind of knife a woman could carry without anyone remarking. She gave her bread. Real bread, 2 days old but still soft in the middle. She gave her a pot of marrow fat. You cannot stay here, Vesa said at last. Mayron's men will come. Maybe tonight, maybe at dawn, but they will come. You need to be somewhere they will not look. The lean-to on the east rise. Too close to the pine I'm going to cut. They'll see you. No, go to the old creche. The creche, the abandoned one, on the west meadow. The one that burned 30 years ago and nobody rebuilt because they said it was unlucky. The roof is mostly gone, but there's a cellar. The door is still hung. I will come to you tomorrow night with the bones and the bark and the earth. The night after is the moon. We do it that night. In the hall. In the hall. In front of the pack. Where Mayron cannot make you vanish. He'll try to kill me before I can start. He will. And you? Vesa smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a woman who had been hiding something for 26 years and was about to let a part of it out. I was the Alpha King's sister before I was anybody's aunt, she said. I still have some teeth, Nyra. Let Mayron find that out in front of the pack. Nyra left Vesa's longhouse 3 hours before dawn. The cold had deepened again, and the moon, the wrong moon, the almost moon, 2 nights off full, had risen and was making the snow blue. She kept to the shadow of the smokehouse, then behind the old grain sheds, then out the gap where the northern palisade had rotted through last autumn, and nobody had fixed it because there was no wood to spare. Her feet, in Vesa's boots, worked. The food was working. The fur cloak was the warmest thing she had worn in her life. For about a quarter of an hour, crossing the open meadow toward the west ruins, she allowed herself something that was not quite hope. Something warm. Something with shape. She was halfway across the meadow when a man stepped out of the tree line on the far side. She stopped. He was a shape at first, a black shape against blacker trees. Then the moon caught him, and she saw the broad shoulders, the fur collar, the slight limp in his left leg that Hale had carried since he broke it at 14 falling out of a pine. Hale. Mayron's man. The boy who had given her honeycomb behind the goat pen when they were both 8. Nyra's hand went to the knife inside her cloak. Hale walked toward her. He did not run. He did not shout. He came across the meadow in long, easy steps, and when he was close enough, she could see that he was carrying a short spear in his right hand, and when he was closer still, she could see his face. He did not look like a man who was hunting her. He looked like a man who was sick. Nyra, he said. Hale. Stand still. Hale, you... I said stand still. Please, just stand still for a minute. I'm not going to hurt you. She did not believe him. She could smell, even at 6 paces, that he was lying about something. But she did not run, because the meadow was open and flat, and he had the spear and she had cold legs, and she knew what would happen in that foot race. He came to within 2 paces and stopped. He looked at her for a long time. His breath steamed around his face. Under the fur collar, his throat was working. You were supposed to be dead, he said. His voice was low and very tired. Last night, he told us you'd be dead. He said the forest would do it. I was glad. Glad. Glad because I wouldn't have to. She didn't answer. There was nothing to answer. He sent me out at dusk, Hale said. He's had men circling the valley all day. He said if anyone sees you, anyone, they come straight back to him. Not the king. Him, not even the blades. Him. And you're going to take me. Hale's mouth moved. For a second, Nyra thought he was going to cry, which shocked her, because Hale had been a hard boy and had grown into a harder man, and she had not seen water in his eyes since they were children. I didn't sleep last night, he said. Did you know that? I sat up in my bunk and I thought about your mother. I thought about the first solstice after she died when you were 12 and you came to the fire alone and nobody would sit with you. And I wanted to sit with you. And I didn't because Mayron was watching and I was already his by then. I was 14. He picked me at 14. Do you understand what that means? I understand. I don't think you do. He owns me, Nyra. He's owned me for 10 years. Everything I eat, he decides. Everything I carry, he gave. Every woman I've been allowed to look at, he's pointed out first. He owns me the way you own a dog. Hale, I'm going to let you go, he said. His voice was shaking. I'm going to turn around and walk back to the pack hold, and I am going to tell Mayron I saw your tracks going north, into the passes, and that I lost them. He will beat me. He will probably beat me very badly. I don't care. I'm doing it anyway. Do you understand me? She stared at him. Why? She said. Because you said it out loud. In the hall. Said what? Hollow binding, he whispered. His whole body flinched on the word. My grandmother used to say it. In the dark. When the winter started going wrong, she said it to my mother, and my mother told her to shut her mouth and never to say it in the house again. And my grandmother looked at me and she said, Hale, someone is going to say it out loud one day. And when they do, you decide what side of the fire you're on. I thought she was a crazy old woman. I have thought that for 15 years. And yesterday you said it in the great hall in front of the Alpha King, and every hair on my body stood up because I knew she was right. Nyra, I don't know what you are. I don't know what you're doing. I just know that when you said that word, something in me stood up, and I don't want to be Mayron's dog when it stands up the rest of the way. She was crying again. She hated it. She couldn't stop it. Go, Hale said. Wherever you are going, go. Hale, go, Nyra. Before I remember, I'm afraid of him. She went. She made herself turn. She made her legs take her across the rest of the meadow, into the black trees, toward the ruined creche. She did not look back for a long time. When she finally did, from the tree line, Hale was still standing in the middle of the meadow. He had not moved. He was looking up at the wrong moon with his face tipped back, and his shoulders were shaking. Then he turned, and he limped back toward the packhold, and he was gone. Whoa. The creche was worse than she had remembered. The roof had collapsed in more than it had 30 years ago. Another winter's snow had broken the last of the main beams, and the cellar door was half off its hinges. But the cellar was dry. There was old straw, moldy but thick. There was a stone bench along one wall where, a long time ago, pack mothers had sat to nurse. There was even a small chimney flue, black with old soot, that she thought she could use for a very small fire if she was careful. She did not light a fire that night. She wrapped herself in Vessa's cloak, ate a careful piece of the bread, and lay down on the straw. She did not sleep well. She did not expect to. At one point, in the deep hour before dawn, she thought she heard that horn again, very far off, across the valley, and it was closer than it had been the night before, by a long way. She did not know what it meant. She knew it was not good. She woke to gray light and the sound of someone breathing in the cellar with her. Her hand was on the knife before she had opened her eyes. A man's voice, low, across the room. Don't. She opened her eyes. He was sitting on the stone bench opposite her straw, a tall man in a dark cloak. The hood was down. The fire had nothing to feed on, and the only light in the cellar was the gray that was coming through the broken door. And in that gray she saw a wasted face and a pair of gold eyes, and her breath left her like she had been kicked. Kaler Virex did not look like a man who should be able to walk. His cheeks were hollowed to the bone. His lips were colorless. He had a spear in his right hand, and he was using it like a staff, and his hands on the shaft were shaking so hard she could see them shake from across the cellar. But he had walked. He had walked, in the night, alone, out of his own hold, to find her. Girl, he said. Sire. She didn't know what else to say. The word came out of her mouth before she could stop it. It sounded ridiculous in the cold cellar. Bessa told me where you'd be. His voice was a dry rasp. Don't be angry with her. She didn't have a choice. I was going to walk into the forest myself and start turning over rocks if she didn't tell me. I am... He coughed. It went on a long time. When it stopped, there was a pink fleck on his lower lip. I am running out of days. I did not have the days to wait until you came back to me. Nyra sat up slowly. She did not put the knife down. You sent me to be cast out. I did not cast you out. I was going to speak with you at moonrise. You let Myron stand in your hall and ask for it. I did. Why? The Alpha King closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he was looking at the floor between his boots. Because I wanted to see what you were, he said. I'm not proud of it. You were a girl who came in from a washing shed with cracked hands and an old shoe, and you said a word in my hall that I have not heard spoken aloud since before you were born, and I had to know if you were your mother's daughter or if you were just repeating something you had overheard. I am sorry. That is a bad answer. It is the only true one I have. I am her daughter. I see that. I am also yours. It came out before she could decide whether to say it. It came out flat and hard, and it did not shake. Kaelor Virex did not move. He did not look up. For a long time he just sat on the stone bench with his wasted hands on the spear, and Nyra watched the top of his dark head. And outside the creche the wind started up again, a thin keening sound that ran through the broken roof like a knife. Yes, he said finally. Say it out loud. You are my daughter. Louder. Nyra Ashen, daughter of Orla of Sleet Creek, you are my blood, and I have been a coward about it for 19 years. The cellar was very quiet. Nyra's hands were shaking. She put the knife down on the straw beside her because she did not trust herself to hold it. I am not going to forgive you for that, she said. I am not asking. I am going to save your pack. I know. I am going to need your blood to do it. I know. Tomorrow night. The full moon. In the Great Hall. In front of everyone. Mayron is going to try to kill me before I can finish. You are going to stop him. Yes. Say it properly. I will stop him, Nyra. I will stop him if it is the last order I give in this life. Nyra looked at him for a long time. The gold in his eyes was the same gold as hers. She had never, until that moment, let herself see it. All right, she said. All right. Then go back. Go back before anyone sees you out. Eat if you can, sleep if you can. Tomorrow night at moonrise, you sit in that hall and you hold on to it long enough for me to do what I came to do. After that, she swallowed. After that, whatever happens, happens. Kaelor Virex pushed himself up on the spear. It took him 2 tries. She did not help him. She could not make herself stand up and help him, and he seemed to understand that and did not ask. At the broken door, he stopped. He did not look back. Your mother, he said, once told me that the strongest thing in the valley was the thing nobody was looking at. I laughed at her. I was 26 years old and I thought I knew what strength was. I was wrong. I was so wrong, Nyra. She was looking at you when she said it. You were 3 years old. You were under the table. He went out. Nyra sat on the straw for a long time after he had gone, with her mother's bark scrolls against her chest and her father's confession in her ears, and she did not cry, because she had used up her crying, and because she had, she understood, a great deal of work to do and not very much time to do it in. And then, outside from the direction of the pack hold, she heard shouting. Men's voices. Many of them. Rising. And under the shouting, clear and deliberate and very close, the horn. Not down the valley this time. At the gate. The horn was not a horn the Ashen Pack owned. Nyra knew every horn in the valley by its voice, the way a mother knows the cries of her own children. The hunt horn was short and nasal. The gathering horn was 2 notes, low and then lower. The warning horn, the one that had not been blown in her lifetime because there had been nothing left to warn against, was supposed to be 3 long blasts, and Torvald the gatekeeper had practiced it once a season on the first new moon of autumn, and Nyra had always been able to hear him practicing from the washing shed, and had always thought he sounded a little out of breath. This horn was none of those. This horn was the one she had heard on the ridge 2 nights ago, the one with the wrongness under it, and it was being blown by someone who was already inside the Ashen Valley. She did not think. She stuffed the bark scrolls back into her underdress. She pulled the hood of Vessa's cloak up and over. She pushed the broken cellar door open just far enough to look out, and then she was up the stone steps and out into the gray morning and moving, fast, low, through the black pines that bordered the burned meadow. Kaylor Virex was already gone. His tracks cut a staggered line back across the meadow toward the packhold, and the staggering was the tracks of a man whose legs were failing him with every pace. Nyra did not follow them. She kept to the tree line, cutting southwest, toward the rise above the main gate. She had grown up climbing that rise in summer to spy on the warriors drilling in the yard below, and she knew there was a fold of ground behind an old windfall where you could lie flat and see the whole face of the packhold without being seen yourself. She got there in 9 minutes. Her lungs were on fire. She dropped into the fold and crawled the last of it on her belly and parted the dry pine needles with her hand and looked down. She almost didn't believe what she was looking at. The ashen packhold sat in the long bowl of the valley, shouldered against the north cliffs. The main gate was a heavy double leaf of pine bound with iron, and it was wide open. That alone was wrong. Torvald never opened both leaves at once. He always kept the left shut to slow whoever was coming in, a habit Kaylor had trained into him 30 years ago. But both leaves were pushed back now, and in the gap between them, on the packed snow of the drill yard, a line of men was standing. Not ashen men. They were tall and broad, and they wore gray. Not winter gray, not fur gray. A dull metallic gray, like the underside of a fish. Their cloaks were the same. Their faces were bare, and their faces were wrong. Not disfigured, not scarred. Wrong in a way Nyra had to look at twice to name, and then a third time, and even then she was not sure. Their eyes were too far apart. Their jaws were a little too long. They stood too still. They looked like men who had been drawn by someone who had heard a good description of a man once, years ago, and had tried to work from memory. There were 11 of them in the yard, and in front of them, at the center of the line, stood a 12th. The 12th wore black and had his hood down, and Nyra saw a gray beard, a sharp nose, and a pair of eyes that from this distance looked colorless. Not gray, not blue, the color of an old coin you find in the dirt. He stood with his gloved hands folded in front of him, and he was speaking, calmly, to High Beta Mayoron, who stood 3 paces in front of him with 4 of his own men at his back. Nyra could not hear words. She was too far. But she could read Mayoron's shoulders, and Mayoron's shoulders were doing something she had never seen them do. They were bowed. Mayoron was bowing to this man. The man from over the East Peaks, she whispered into the dry needles. A man I will not name in my own house. Vessa's voice came back to her, clean as water. That man told Kaylor there was a power sleeping in the root of our mountain that could be woken, and that if Kaylor woke it, the Tarn would never cross our line again. Nyra's hands went cold. Colder than the morning. The man who had taught Kaylor Virex how to hollow bind his own pack 26 years ago was standing in the ashen yard, and he had not come alone. She watched. She could not do anything else. She watched the gray cloak took a slow half-step to the side and gestured toward something behind him, and 2 of the metallic men peeled off the line and dragged forward a figure that had been made small by its own crouching. A wolf. A black wolf, nearly full-grown, with its front paws bound in wire, dragging on its belly. The wolf was not one of Ashen's. The Ashen Pack's wolves did not crouch like that. They were proud and thin and starving, but they did not crouch. This wolf had been broken by something, somewhere, for a long time. The gray cloak pointed at the wolf and said something Nyra still could not hear. Mayoron, in the yard, turned to one of his men. The man stepped forward and drew a short knife from his belt and cut, quickly and without ceremony, the throat of the black wolf. Blood went out across the snow in a fan, and at the edge of Nyra's vision, above the packhold, above the north cliffs, above the whole valley, the sky did something she could not put a name to. It did not darken. It did not lighten. It sort of inhaled. The clouds shifted. A shape under the clouds, a deeper shape, the shape of something huge and low and breathing, moved 1 inch closer to the valley floor. The mountain heard the blood. Nyra shoved her fist into her mouth. In the yard, the gray cloak smiled. She could see the smile from the rise. It was not a cruel smile. That was what was terrible about it. It was a pleased smile, like a man watching his dog do the trick he had been teaching it. Mayoron bowed again, deeper, and then he turned and he spoke to his men, and his men fanned out, and Nyra understood, watching them, what was happening. They were taking the pack hold, not by force. Not yet. They were moving to the key points, the armory, the main well, the long hall, the king's chamber, calmly, the way men move through a house they have been told they have already inherited. The Ashen warriors in the yard, the real ones, the ones not in Mayron's pocket, stood in knots of 3 and 4, not moving, not knowing whether to move. She saw Olin, the gray-bearded gatekeeper, put his hand on his axe and then take it away again. She saw a young warrior named Bran, who had been one of her brother Doran's friends, turn his face toward the long hall with a look of pure animal confusion, a man trying to figure out what side of a fight he was on when nobody had shouted that there was a fight. The worst of it was the silence. Nobody was shouting. Meryn had planned this well. He had made this look like something the pack should accept without a sound. Then, from the doors of the long hall, Vessa Thorn came out. She came out alone. She did not have the knife this time. She had a staff, a plain walking staff, and she was using it the way her brother had been using the spear in the cellar, because she was 71 years old, and she was walking out into a yard full of metallic men to meet the person who had killed her family. Mayron saw her and flinched, actually flinched. Then he gathered himself. He stepped between her and the gray cloak. He spread his arms wide, the way you might spread your arms to turn an old woman back from a fire she was about to walk into. "Luna Thorn," Mayron called, loud enough that his voice carried up to the rise. "Go back inside." "Step aside, Meryn." "Luna, I said step aside." Vessa's voice had a quality to it Nyra had never heard. It was not loud. It was the kind of quiet that made a room stop arguing. Mayron did not step aside, but his arms came down. Vessa walked past him. She walked up to within 4 paces of the gray cloak, and she stopped, and she looked him up and down, and then she spat in the snow. "Sabrin Vol," she said. The gray cloak smiled wider. He inclined his head just slightly. "Lady Vessa, it has been a long time." "Not long enough. 26 winters. I have counted each." "You were not invited back." "I was called back," Sabrin Vol said mildly, "by your brother's curse, which has been singing for me under this mountain for 5 years now. I am surprised you could not hear it. You used to have a better ear." "Get out of my valley." "Your valley is not yours, Lady Vessa. Your valley is mine, by oath, by blood, by the hand your brother put into the dark 26 winters ago." He raised his own gloved hand and turned it, palm up, as if displaying something that sat in it invisibly. "He borrowed. I am collecting. It is nothing personal. It is simply how these things end." Kaelor, Sabrin said gently, is dying in his bed. Kaelor has been dying in his bed since the last thaw. I have a new agreement with High Beta Mayron, who has been kind enough to speak for the pack in your brother's absence. The pack will be spared the final part of the taking. In exchange, the pack will come under a new hand. That hand is mine. It is a very old arrangement, Lady Vessa, and a very fair one. Nobody dies who does not need to. "You're lying." "I am the least lying person in this yard. Look around you." Vessa looked around. The metallic men had reached the long hall. 2 of them were at the king's chamber door. 3 more were at the armory. 1 was standing politely at the well. Meryn's men were with them, in pairs, and the rest of the warriors, Olin, Bran, the others, were still in their knots, still not moving, because nobody had shouted, and nobody had declared a side. Vessa turned back to Sabrin. Her staff came up. "Meryn," she said, without looking at him, "this is the man your father warned every child in the pack about. This is the thing your grandmother made you swear on her grave you would never speak to. You are standing next to him, and you are bowing to him, and I am looking at you right now, and I am telling you, put your knife into his throat, boy, or I will die knowing you were the last beta of the Ashen line, and the name will die with you, and it will die dirty." Mayron did not move. "Mayron!" "Luna," Meryn said, and his voice was flat. "He is going to save what is left of us." "He is going to eat what is left of us, you fool child." "That is not what the arrangement—" "Mayron," Sabrin Vol said softly, almost kindly. "Lady Vessa does not understand the arrangement. She is old. She has been carrying grief for her brother for a long time. Perhaps we could help her sit down somewhere warm while the rest of this is concluded." 2 of the metallic men moved, and Vessa Thorn, who had been Luna of the Ashen Pack before Nyra was born, who had carried a knife to a conversation with her own niece, who had hidden in Omega's dead mother's wolf bones under her floor for 7 winters, did the last thing Nyra would have ever guessed she would do. She laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was a hard, dry, delighted laugh. The laugh of a woman who has been waiting 26 years for a particular door to open. "Sabrin," she said, "you have gotten stupid in your old age." And she swung her staff. She was 71. She was thin. She should not have been able to move that fast. But she brought the staff up and around in a 2-handed arc that Nyra remembered very suddenly from being 6 years old in the weavery, watching Aunt Vessa show a younger woman how to break a wolf's jaw with the butt of a spear. Here and here. And you do not hesitate, girl. You do not hesitate. There is nothing in your life worth hesitating for. And the staff came down across the side of Sabrin Vol's face with a sound like a stone being split. Sabrin went backward into the snow. Not neatly. His head snapped, his hood went up, his hands went up too late, and he landed on his back with blood coming out of his ear. For 1/2 second, the whole yard stopped breathing. Then the metallic men moved. They did not move like men. Nyra saw it from the rise as clearly as if she had been standing over them. They did not accelerate. They did not draw. They simply were where they had been, and then, in the next flicker, they were on Vessa Thorne. 2 of them took her by the arms. A third one, and this was the one Nyra would see in the dark behind her eyes for a long time afterward, a third one opened its mouth, and inside the mouth was not teeth. Inside was a hole. Nyra did not see what the hole did. Vessa's body hit it, but Vessa's body bucked once, hard, and then went limp, and the 2 metallic men lowered her, almost gently, into the snow. And Myron, High Beta Marin, who had been a boy once, who had hit Nyra when she was 9 for dropping a bowl, who had walked her out into the forest 2 nights ago and told her he was sorry, turned his face away. He turned it away so he would not have to watch. From the rise, Nyra made a sound that was not a word. She was up before she had decided to be up. She was running down the slope before she had decided to run. Her boots, Vessa's boots, broke through the crust at every 3rd step, and she fell twice, and she got up twice, and she ran on, because the woman who had fed her broth 8 hours ago was lying in the snow of the Ashen yard, and there was no longer anywhere in this valley that was not on fire in some invisible way. She was not thinking. She was not planning. She was running with Vessa's hunting knife in her hand and her mother's bark scrolls against her ribs and a hot black noise behind her eyes. And if she had reached the yard, she would have died in it. She did not reach the yard. A hand caught her around the waist about 50 paces from the gate. A second hand came up over her mouth. She bit it. The hand did not let go. A body pulled her sideways off her line into the shadow of the wall of the old grain sheds and pressed her against the wood and held her there. Nyra. Nyra. It's me. She recognized the voice after a second. She did not stop fighting for another second. Then her knees went and she sagged against the wood of the shed, and the hand came off her mouth, and Hale, the Beta's man, looked at her with a face that had no color at all in it. "She's dead," Nyra said. "Hale, she's dead. I know. I saw. You have to not walk into that yard." "Nyra, listen to me. If you walk in there right now, you are one more body on the snow and your mother's work dies with you. Do you hear me? They killed... I heard you. I know what they did. Half of it was done before anyone in the yard understood it had started. Listen." He shook her. Once. Not hard. "Listen. There are warriors in that yard who have not decided yet. Olin, Bran, the twins from the North Lodge. They watched her go down and they did not draw. Do you know why they did not draw? Because they are cowards. Because nobody has told them they are allowed to. Marin is the voice of this pack right now. Marin is telling them to stand still. The king has not been in the hall in 2 days. They are waiting to be told who to be. Somebody has to tell them, Nyra. The king is dying in a bed. Then somebody else has to tell them." She looked at him. The black noise behind her eyes started to fall back, slowly, into something she could see through. "I can't," she said. "Hale, I can't. Look at me. I'm an Omega. They'll laugh. They already did laugh. In the hall. Yesterday. I was there. And then you said a word and nobody laughed anymore, Nyra. Nobody." Olin made the sign against his chest. Bran went white. Every wolf in that room who still has a grandmother in them heard you. You just have to say it again, louder, where the yard can hear you, before Sabrin stands up. Is Sabrin going to stand up? Hale's jaw worked.
He bled, Hale said, but he is not a man. I do not know if men like him die when they bleed. I think we have maybe a quarter of an hour before he is upright again. Maybe less. Then we don't have time. We don't. That's the point. Come on.
He pulled her. She let him pull her. They went along the back of the grain sheds, bent low, into the narrow alley between the smokehouse and the old stables, into the blind spot behind the long hall that she had been sent to scrub in the summer when she was 12, and she had hated it then, and she was going to bless it now. Hale stopped at the side door of the hall. It was the servants' door. It was the door the Omegas had used to bring broth to the council.
Marin's got 3 men at the front, he whispered. 2 at the king's chamber, 2 at the armory. Sabrin's line is all still in the yard around her. The side door is not watched. It is not watched because nobody important is ever supposed to come through it. That's why you're going to come through it, Nyra. You are going to walk into that hall, and you are going to go up on the dais, and you are going to say what you said yesterday, and you are going to say it loud, and you are going to say it before Sabrin gets his feet under him, because once he is standing again, nobody in that valley is going to be allowed to hear you. What if Kaelor is already... Then you do it alone. Nyra, look at me. He took her shoulders. I cannot come in with you. If I walk in with you, I am a traitor, and every beta's dog in that yard puts a blade in both of us before you open your mouth. I have to go back out and stand where Mayron put me. I have to nod when he tells me to nod. I am going to stand in that yard, and I am going to wait for one thing. And that one thing is the moment you are on the dais with the door open behind you and a voice out of you loud enough to shake a rafter. When I hear that, I am drawing. Olin will draw, Bran will draw. We are 8, maybe 9. It is not enough to win. It is enough to make a mess. A mess is what you need. Do you understand? Yes. Say it. I understand.
Go. He pushed her gently through the side door. The hall was almost dark. The great fire pit had gone down to embers. The antler throne on the dais at the far end looked like a pile of bones in the half-light. Nobody was in the hall. Nobody alive, at least. Nyra stood in the servant's doorway and listened, and for a long moment the only sound was the settling of the embers and the thud of her own heart in her own throat. Then, from the far side of the hall, behind the dais, she heard a cough. A man's cough. Wet. She crossed the hall on Vessa's boots. The rushes on the floor were old and brittle, and they hissed under her weight. She went up onto the dais, past the antler throne, to the small side door behind it that led to the king's chamber. The door was open. Kaelor Virex was lying on the floor of his own antechamber. He had not made it back to his bed. He had made it through the main hall and into the antechamber, and then his legs had finally told him no, and he was lying on his side on the stone with the spear still in his hand, and he was coughing up pink. Sire. Don't, he wheezed. Don't call me that. Not now. Kaelor. Better. She knelt. She got an arm under his shoulders. She was not strong enough to lift him by herself. Not anymore. Not with no food for 3 days. But she got him into a half-sit against the wall. His head lolled. His eyes found hers after a moment. Vessa, he said. She did not answer. His face, which she had thought yesterday could not get any worse, got worse. She was coming to meet you at the creche tonight. She had the bones. I know, Kaelor, listen. She went to meet Sabrin first. I knew she would. She always said if he ever came back, she would go first, before anyone, because she... Kaelor, listen. He stopped. His gold eyes focused on her. They were the only part of him that still looked like the king from the stories. Sabrin is in the yard, she said. He is hurt, but he is not dead. Vessa is dead. Myron has bowed to him. The pack does not know what to do. I need you on your feet. I need you with me in that hall in the next 5 minutes, or this valley is already gone. Do you hear me? 5 minutes, or less. Nyra, I can't. You can. You are going to. Nyra, you said, she said, and her voice was shaking, but not with tears this time, with something else. Something under the tears that had been building in her for 19 years. You said in the cellar that you would stop him. You said it would be the last order of your life. This is the order. Now, stand up." She pulled him. He was heavier than he had been in the cellar. Whatever was eating him from the inside had taken another step in the morning, but he put the spear against the stone and he pushed, and she pulled, and together, between the two of them, they got him upright. He leaned on the spear. He breathed in and out. He did not cough this time. He set his teeth. "The tall door," he said. "What?" "Take me through the tall door, to the dais, not the side. The tall door. If I come in the side door, I am a sick man. If I come through the tall door, I am still the king. Take me the long way, Nyra." She understood. They went. It took a long time. It took a very long time for the length of one dim hall. She put his arm over her shoulders and she walked him, slow, around the back of the chamber, down the cold corridor the blades used, around to the main entry of the hall, behind the big carved doors the Alpha King came through to hold court in his strongest days. Twice his knees buckled. Twice she held him up. Once he said into her ear, "Your mother would have hated me for this." And she said back, "My mother is the reason you can still walk. You hold on to that." And he made a small broken sound that might have been a laugh. At the tall door she stopped. She put her hand on the latch. "Ready?" "No." "Good. Me neither." She pushed the doors open. The hall was still empty. The doors at the far end, the main yard doors, were open a slit, and through the slit she could hear the yard. And the yard was no longer silent. She could hear Mehron's voice, loud, explaining something. She could hear Sabrin's voice under Mehron's, quieter, giving instructions. She could hear very faintly the sound of men being moved into a formation. She walked Kylor up the long rush-strewn aisle, past the cold pit, up the 3 stone steps of the dais. She set him down on the antler throne. He did not slump. He locked his elbows on the arms of it. He tipped his chin up. He breathed in. "Open the yard doors," he said. "Kylor, open them, wide. Stand beside me. Do not stand behind me. Beside me, Nyra." She opened the doors. The yard came in with the blast of cold and the smell of blood and burned hair. Every face in the yard turned. Myron was in the middle of a sentence. He did not finish it. He saw Kylor in the antler throne, and he saw Nyra at Kylor's right hand, and his mouth stopped moving, and for one clear second she saw in him something she had not expected ever to see in Myron's face. Fear. Real fear. Not the ambitious man's fear of being caught, the child's fear of being seen by the parent he had been betraying. Sabrin Vol was on his feet. He had blood down the side of his neck, and his gray beard was black with it, and his hood was down. He was standing where he had been when Vesa had hit him, and Vesa was lying in the snow at his feet, and he was looking straight at the open doors of the hall, at the dais, at the dying king on the throne, and the Omega girl beside him. Sabrin's face did not change, but his colorless eyes, which had been pleased all morning, stopped being pleased. Kylor Virex, Alpha King of the Ashen, did not stand up from the throne. He could not. Instead, he put both hands on the arms of it, and he looked out over his yard, and he said, in a voice that was thinner than yesterday's, but still, somehow, a king's voice, "Olin." The gray-bearded gatekeeper startled. "Sire, where is my sister?" Olin's face crumpled. He could not make his mouth work. "Sire," one of the younger warriors, Brand, said, stepping forward. "Sire, Luna Thorn, they—" "Say it, son." "She's dead, sire. The gray men killed her, in front of us, just now. And you did nothing." Bran looked down at his boots. "No, sire." "None of you." Silence in the yard. "Olin." "Sire." "Who is the man in the black cloak beside my high beta?" "Sire," Olin whispered, "I do not know his name." "His name," Kylor said, and he looked at Sabrin Vol for the first time since the doors had opened, and his gold eyes in his dying face went, for one impossible second, very clear. "His name is Sabrin Vol. And 26 winters ago I stood in the crypt under this hall, and I put my own blade in my own hand, and I swore an oath to him that I have been dying of ever since. And every one of you standing in this yard has been dying of it with me. And the winters that have been eating your children have been the coin I borrowed from him that day, coming due. That is the truth. That is the truth I have not said out loud in 26 winters. I am saying it now. Hear me say it. The yard did not move. Nobody in the yard was breathing. Sabrin Vol slowly smiled again.
Alpha King, he said, you are confused. You are very ill. Let your beta handle this. Your beta and I have an arrangement. My beta, Kalor said, is relieved. Maron jerked. Sire, Marin of the line of Kel, you are stripped of your rank. Your knife is forfeit. Your men are no longer yours. If you walk out of this yard in the next hour, you walk as an unbanded wolf. If you stay kneeling. Choose. Sire, you are not. Choose, Marin.
Marin did not choose. His hand started to move toward his knife and then stopped, and then started again. And then, in a motion that surprised Nyra so much she almost missed it, he turned, not toward Kalor, but toward Sabrin Vol, and he said, in a voice that was very small, Master, he's raving. He doesn't have the pack. Finish it. Master. Nyra heard the word. She heard in the yard about 40 other ashen wolves hear it too. She saw Olin's face go from grief to something much older and much harder. She saw Bran's hand go to his axe and stay there. She saw the twins from the North Lodge step together, one pace forward out of their knot, in the way they always moved together, because they always did. Sabrin Vol nodded once. As you wish, he said. He raised his gloved hand. The metallic men moved. They moved toward this hall, toward the dais, toward the open doors, toward Kalor on the throne and Nyra beside him. 11 of them, in their gray, in that terrible, not quite right flicker that wasn't running. And Hale the Beta's man, standing just behind Maron with his own short axe in his belt, drew. He did not shout. He drew, and he turned, and he put the short axe into the back of Maron's neck, just above the collar of his leather. Maron went down without a sound. Olin drew an instant later. Bran drew. The twins drew. 3 other warriors Nyra did not know the names of drew. 7 blades in the yard, out, against 11 metallic men in 1 gray cloak. And it was not going to be enough. She could see. It was not going to be enough. But it was a mess. It was the mess Hale had promised her. And in the middle of the mess, Nyra Ashen raised her voice in the doorway of the great hall of her pack, and she said, not screamed, but said, loud enough that the whole yard heard every word, I am the daughter of Orla of Sleet Creek and of Kalor Virex, Alpha King of the Ashen. I am kin of the throne. I have my mother's writings, and I have the way to break the hollow binding, and it will be broken tomorrow night on the full moon in this hall. Any wolf of the Ashen pack who wants to see the spring again stands with the king. Any wolf who bows to the thing in the black cloak stands where Maron is lying. Choose now. For 1 second, she thought nothing was going to happen. Then Olin the gatekeeper, old Olin with the gray beard, stepped between her and the nearest metallic man and set his axe in a 2-handed grip across his chest. Bran went to his left. The twins went to his right. The 7 warriors became a wedge, and the wedge did not break, and in the yard behind them, more men began, slowly and without a word, to walk over to stand with them. 11, 15, and 20. Sabrin Vol watched this happen and did not move. And then from down the valley, from the east, where the tree line met the meadow, where an hour ago Kalor Virex had staggered through snow to find her in a ruined creche, the horn sounded again. A different horn this time. Not Sabrin's. It was a horn Nyra had never heard in her life. And yet, the instant she heard it, every wolf in her body stood up at once, because she had in fact heard it once before, and only once, in a dream when she was 6 years old, a dream her mother had refused to let her talk about in the morning. A long, silver note, and under the note a second note, and under that a third, and it rolled across the Ashen Valley from the east, and every frozen pine in the meadow shook snow from its branches in answer. Sabrin Vol turned his head very slowly toward the sound. For the first time his face did something. It went still in a way his stillness had not been still before. No, he said quietly, almost to himself. No, that is not possible. I took them all. Kalor, on the throne behind Nyra, let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and a cough, and the beginning of a sob all at once. Oh, he said. Oh, Orla. Oh, you brave woman. Kalor? Nyra. He reached up. He caught her wrist. His hand, which had been shaking for a day and a half, was suddenly, strangely, not shaking at all. Nyra, your mother. Your mother did not just write the recipe. She went east. The last summer, the summer before she died. She told me she was going to the moors for birthing herb. She was not. I did not know. Nyra? The horn sounded again, closer, and now under it, distinct, clear, impossible, came another sound. Wolves. A lot of wolves. Running. Together. A pack. A pack Nyra did not know. A pack that had not been in the Ashen Valley in her lifetime. A pack coming across the eastern meadow at a flat run in broad daylight, in the direction of the open gates, and the sound of them, the sound of living, fed, strong wolves moving as one, was a sound the Ashen Valley had not made in 4 winters. Sabrin Vol's colorless eyes came back to Nyra. Your mother, he said softly, and for the first time there was something in his voice that was not kind. Did not die of fever, girl. I know, Nyra said. Your mother went east. I know. Your mother went to the Greymoor. Your mother made a pact of her own. I know. Do you know what she traded for it? Nyra did not answer. She did not have an answer. Her mother's bark scrolls had never said. Sabrin smiled one last time, a thin, terrible smile. She traded you, he said. And in the open gate of the Ashen Packhold, in full daylight, with the horn still ringing over the valley and the wolves still running, a woman appeared between the pines at the far end of the meadow. Tall, gray-cloaked, silver-haired, leading 23 wolves and 12 warriors in black and silver on foot. She was too far away to see clearly. She lifted her hand in a greeting to the Packhold, and the greeting was not directed at Kaelor, and it was not directed at Sabrin, and it was not directed at the dying warriors in the yard. It was directed precisely and unmistakably at Nyra. And from behind Nyra, very quietly, Kaelor Vyrek said, Nyra, that is your mother's sister. That is your aunt. Your mother had an older sister she never told you about. She sent her east 30 years ago to keep her alive. Your mother has been, you have been promised since you were 3 years old to a pack you have never seen. The silver-haired woman in the meadow took a step forward. The 23 wolves sat down behind her as one animal. The 12 warriors stopped. She waited. And Nyra Ashen, Omega, outcast, 19 summers old, stood in the doorway of a great hall beside a dying king she had called father for the first time 2 hours ago, and understood that the bond that had never moved in her whole life, the bond she had been called worthless for not having, had not been absent. It had been waiting. It had been waiting for her to see it coming across the meadow. The silver-haired woman waited. She waited the way a wolf waits, not impatient, not eager, simply present. And the 23 wolves behind her sat in a half-circle in the churned snow of the meadow, like pieces of a single animal that had been laid down carefully on a table. The 12 black and silver warriors did not move either. Every one of them had a hand resting on the pommel of a blade, and not one of those hands was tight. They were the hands of people who had come a long way and were not going to hurry the last part of it. Nyra could not for a moment make her legs take a step. A pack, she kept thinking. A whole pack. Fed. Upright. Standing in her valley. Behind her, on the antler throne, Kaelor's fingers tightened on her wrist and then loosened again. Go, he said, low. Nyra, go meet her. It has to be you. If it is me, it is an old king walking out to be rescued by the Greymoor. If it is you, it is what your mother wanted. Kaelor, I will hold the yard. I can hold a yard for 10 minutes, girl. Do not mistake me for a corpse yet. Go. She went. She came down the stone steps of the dais. She came down onto the rushes, then out through the open doors into the cold. Olin, the gray-bearded gatekeeper, turned his head as she passed, and then, because he did not know what else to do, he saluted her with the butt of his axe, and Bran did the same a second later, and then, in an uneven, ragged motion that moved down the wedge, every warrior who had chosen the throne saluted her in turn, Omega or not. And the saluting was so strange and so unearned that she almost tripped on it. She did not look at Sabrin Vol as she passed him. She did not look at Vesa. She could not. There would be time for Vesa later, or there would not be time at all, and either way, there was no version of this next hour that she survived if she let herself look down at the snow in the middle of the yard. She walked out through the open gate. The meadow was long, 200 paces, maybe more. The snow was bright and grainy in the daylight, and the air was that absolutely still, Absolutely listening air that comes after a horn sound has faded. Every step she took, she felt the whole valley watching her. The 40 wolves and men behind her at her back, the 12 warriors and 23 wolves ahead of her, the thing under the stones, the shape under the clouds. The bond which had been, she understood now, she understood it clear as water, a current running under her whole life and never permitted to surface, came up into her chest like a fish coming up into light. She stopped 3 paces from the silver-haired woman. Up close, the woman was not as old as Nyra had thought from the hall. 50, maybe. Her hair was prematurely silver. Her face was her mother's face, aged another 20 years and made harder by weather. The eyes were not her mother's. Her mother's eyes had been brown. These eyes were gray, a real gray, the color of river ice, not Sabrinvol's colorless old coin gray. The woman looked at her a long time. She did not speak first. Finally, Nyra said, "Because somebody had to. My mother never told me you existed." "She wasn't supposed to," the silver-haired woman said. Her voice was low and slightly hoarse, the voice of someone who did not talk for pleasure. "That was part of the trade. You were safer in the Ashen Pack if nobody in it knew you had a second door to walk through. I told her, when she came to me, I told her, 'Orla, if you do this, you do not get to tell her.' She agreed. She was harder than she looked, your mother. She agreed in about a heartbeat. What is your name?" "Cyan Graymore, Luna of the Graymore Pack, your mother's elder sister. I was 22 when they sent me east. She was 16. We have not stood in the same valley since. She's dead." "I know. For 7 years." "I have known," Cyan said quietly, "for 7 years. The bond does not lie about that. It came unstrung one night in the Graymore, and I sat on the floor of my own longhouse, and I cried until I could not see. Do not tell me how long my sister has been dead, girl. I have counted each morning." Nyra's throat closed. Cyan Graymore looked past her, over her shoulder, at the open gate of the Ashen Packhold and the yard beyond it, at the wedge of ashen warriors with the dying king on the throne at their back, and the gray cloak standing alone in the snow with his metallic men held in check behind him. "Sabren is here," she said. "Yes. Your mother said he would come, the year she came to me. She said, 'When my daughter is of age, Sabren will come for the debt, and my daughter will be the one who has to pay it or break it, and I will not be there to help her, and I need you to be there.' I said yes. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Tell me, Nyra, are you going to pay it or break it?" "Break it." "Good. Tonight." "The moon is not full tonight." "Tomorrow night." "Better." Cyan did not smile. She did not soften. She simply reached across the 3 paces between them and put her open palm, gloved, against Nyra's cheek, and the cold of the leather and the weight of the hand and the simple fact that somebody older in blood of her blood had, for the first time in 7 years, touched her face without intending to scold or hit, did something to Nyra's composure that she had been holding together since dawn. Her face went for half a second. Cyan did not remark on it. "Listen," Cyan said. "We will go back into your yard together. I will tell the thing in the black cloak what he already knows, which is that his agreement is void because there is now another pack present in this valley, and the oath he took with your father was never made across a Graymore witness, which is, under the old laws, a flaw he did not catch 26 years ago because he thought I was dead in a ditch somewhere east of the peaks. He will be very angry. He may strike. My warriors will hold. Your warriors will hold. Your father will last. And at moonrise tomorrow you will do what your mother taught you to do, and I will stand at the door of your hall with my teeth bare while you do it. And if the binding does not break, we will all die together in the same hall, which is not the worst way for a family to go. Do you accept?" "Yes. Say it properly, as a Luna's daughter." Nyra swallowed. "I accept, Luna Graymore." "Good girl. Walk with me." They turned together. Cyan Graymore raised her hand, 2 fingers, a small, economical gesture. And behind her the 23 Graymore wolves rose, as one animal, and the 12 warriors fell into step at her flanks, and they walked back across the long meadow together toward the Ashen Gate. Nyra walked at Cyan's left shoulder because she did not know where else to walk, and halfway across the meadow Cyan said quietly, not looking at her, "You look like her. In the mouth. You do not walk like her. Your walk is your father's. Don't let that shame you. He was not all bad. Just most of him. You knew him. I knew him when he was 20. I knew what he was going to do before he did it, and I could not stop him either, so do not spend any long hours being angry at yourself for what you could not stop. Women of our line learn that young or we do not last. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Any of it. I have never stood in front of a pack. I washed cloaks yesterday. I was going to die in a snowbank the day before yesterday. I do not know how to be anybody's daughter in public. Cyan Greymore did something with her mouth that was not quite a smile. It was more like the small private grimace of a woman who had heard something familiar. Neither did she, Cyan said. Your mother. Neither did she the first time. And she still walked into the great hall of the Ashen on the arm of an Alpha King with a belly full of Sabrin Vol's curse and a head full of plans, and she went into the birthing hut with no one but me in a dream to hold her hand. And she raised you in a pack that did not know your name on purpose, for 12 years alone. And then she walked east across 400 miles of hungry country on her own feet to ask me for a favor. You are not her. You do not need to be her. You need to walk across 50 more paces of this meadow without falling over, and then you need to do one single thing at a time for about a day and a half. Can you do that? Yes. Then do it. Sabrin Vol watched them come. He had cleaned the blood off his face with his own glove, and he stood again in the center of the yard the way he had stood in it when Nyra had first seen him from the ridge. His colorless eyes were no longer pleased. They were not angry either. They had gone to a kind of flat attention that Nyra did not like at all, the way a very dangerous dog goes quiet just before it goes for a throat. Cyan Greymore walked her warriors 3 paces inside the Ashen Gate and stopped. Her wolves fanned out around her. She set her feet. Sabrin. Luna Greymore. He inclined his head exactly as he had done to Vesa. I did not expect to see you walking. I did not expect to see you in an Ashen yard, and yet here you are. I had an appointment. Your appointment is voided. Is it? You took oath with Kalor Virex 26 summers ago. Under the old law, an oath between an alpha and a power of the Understones requires a Luna's witness from a neighboring pack to be binding past 1 generation. I was Luna of the Greymore on that day. I was not called. You did not call me because you believed the Greymore to be scattered after the fever year. We were not scattered. We were thin. Thin is not scattered. You made your oath on an unwitnessed table. It is void on its 2nd generation, which is this one. You have no claim on this pack's 2nd generation, and Nyra Ashen is the 2nd generation. You have been eating a debt you never had a right to collect. Sabrin Vol did not react for a long time. The yard waited. When he spoke, his voice was the same mild voice he had used to Vesa. That is, he said, a very clever reading of a very old law. It is the reading, Sabrin. By whose interpretation? By mine, and by the interpretation of any pack still alive east of these peaks, which is all of them. I have brought the heads of 3 pack councils with me to speak to it if you require speaking to. They are in the Greymore camp, an hour's ride from here. She turned her head slightly. Gart. One of the 12 black and silver warriors stepped a half-pace forward. Luna. If the agent of the Understones requires further witness to the void of his claim, you will ride. Tonight. Yes, Luna. Cyan turned back to Sabrin. Leave, she said. Take your constructs. Take your dog. She did not look at Meron's body, but her mouth tightened on the word. Or leave him for his pack to bury. Go back under the East Peaks and tell whatever is under them that the Ashen debt is not its meal any longer. You have until the full moon tomorrow. After moonrise tomorrow, the binding breaks, and you and your kind are no longer welcome in these valleys. If you are here at moonrise, I will take off your head myself, and your kind will have to explain to the Understones why they are missing their caretaker. Do you understand, Sabrin? Sabrin Vol smiled again. Nyra wished he had not. Luna Greymore, he said softly. The old law is clever, yes, but the old law is also made of words, and the thing under your mountain is not made of words. It is hungry, and it has been fed for 26 winters, and it has learned the taste of this valley. It will not simply go elsewhere because you read it a law. You have brought your pack here to rescue an Omega. That is sentimental of you. I did not know the Greymore had become sentimental. You do not know what the Greymore is anymore, Sabrin. You have not been invited to. Then let me meet it. He inclined his head once, almost politely, and took a step back. I will go. For today. I will go, and I will sit on the east ridge, and I will watch what this Omega of yours attempts tomorrow at moonrise. If she fails, as she will fail, she is 19 summers old and she has been half-starved for 4 winters, and the recipe she holds was not written by a master. Then I will come back down into this yard at dawn, and I will take my debt, and I will take it with interest. If she succeeds, he let the word hang a moment. If she succeeds, I will go east, as you say. I will give you this. I will give you tomorrow night. It is not much to give. Your Omega will not make it through the night. That, Nyra said, and her voice came out louder than she meant it, is not your decision. Sabrin's colorless eyes slid to her. Isn't it, child? No, it's mine, and I've already made it. Take your men and get off my father's land. The yard, the Ashen yard, which had been silent since the doors of the hall had opened, made a sound at that. Not a cheer, nothing as clean as a cheer, a low rising murmur, the kind of sound a pack makes when one of its own has said a sentence it did not know it had been waiting to hear. My father's land. She had not planned to say it that way. It had come out of her without a vote. Sabrinval looked at her a second longer. Then, to her surprise, he inclined his head one final time, deeper than before. As you say, daughter of Orla. He turned. He lifted one gloved hand. The metallic men, 11 of them, the 12th still lying where it had been, or perhaps it had never been a 12th. Nyra could not keep them counted. They were hard to count. Flickered once and were in motion behind him, walking out through the gate at his back in the same not-quite-right gate, and in under 2 minutes, Sabrin Vol and his line were across the meadow and into the east tree line, and the horn did not sound after them, because horns were for living things. Cian Greymore did not lower her guard until they were gone. When the last grayback had vanished between the pines, she let out a breath that she had clearly been holding a long time, and she turned to Nyra, and she said quietly, so only Nyra could hear, He gave in too easily. I know. You know. I could feel it. He wanted us to have tomorrow night. That scared me worse than if he'd fought. Cian Greymore looked at her sharply. You felt it? Yes. Through what? I don't know. Just, he was pleased again, right at the end. He was pleased when he said, Your Omega will not make it through the night. I could feel it in my mouth like a taste. Cian was quiet for a long moment. Nyra. Yes. You have your mother's ear. Your mother could feel intent in a man's body from across a room. She told me once it was the thing she was most afraid of in herself. You will need that ear tomorrow night. Trust it. It is not a trick of the blood. It is a gift. Do you understand? No. Good. Do not pretend to understand gifts. They work better that way. They buried Vessa Thorn that afternoon. Nyra would not let them do it in the yard. She had Olin and Bran and 2 of the Greymore warriors carry her aunt up through the west meadow, past the ruined creche where Kalor had come to her in the dawn, to the ridge where Vessa had once told her, when she was 6, that the best view of the whole valley was from the lightning-struck pine. They buried Vessa at the foot of that pine. They could not dig deep. The ground was iron. They made a cairn of stone and wood and a cross-stave of antler, and Cian Greymore spoke the Greymore words for a dead sister of a sister. And Olin the gatekeeper spoke the Ashen words for a fallen Luna. And Kalor Virex, who had had to be carried up the slope on a pine plank litter by 4 warriors, lay propped against the trunk of a sister tree and could not finish the words he tried to speak, and nobody asked him to. Nyra took the inner bark of the lightning-struck pine herself. 2 strips. She used Vessa's knife. Her hand shook, and she cut her own thumb doing it, and Cian Greymore did not offer to take the knife from her, because Cian Greymore was, Nyra was beginning to understand, not a woman who took things out of your hand just because you were shaking. On the way back down the ridge, Cian walked beside her and said, without looking at her, Where is your mother buried? Under her own step, her threshold. Yes. My brother laid her there. It was midsummer. We did not have the wood to burn her properly, and there was no one left in the pack who would help us. So, Nyra stopped. Her throat was doing the hot thing it did. So we laid her under the step of her birthing hut, and we pressed earth over her, and the hut stood over her for 2 more years, and then the pack came and burned the hut for firewood that first bad winter. They burned it with her under it. I was I was 15. I stood in the yard and I watched the smoke and I did nothing. Amuam bopim pasumtabiyin.
You were 15. I did nothing. You were 15, Nyra. The pack that burned your mother's hut is the same pack that is going to stand in a circle around you tomorrow night and watch you save their lives. That is the price they are paying. Let them pay it. Do not take it out of their hands by hating them on their own behalf. That is a lesson your mother learned late. Learn it now. Nyra walked the rest of the ridge without answering.
They went to the place where Orla's hut had been. It was a black square in the snow, with the stone of the threshold still lying in it, charred but whole. Cyan knelt. Nyra knelt beside her. Cyan did not dig. She put her bare hand, ungloved, against the stone and closed her eyes, and after a moment she said quietly, "Hello, sister." She let her hand rest there a long time. Then she opened her eyes, and she reached under the stone where the old earth had caked up against it, and she took, with 2 fingers, a small pinch of the dark soil. She tipped it into a clean scrap of linen Nyra held open. She folded the linen. She tied it. "This is not a handful," Cyan said. "This is a pinch. Your mother's book said a handful because your mother wrote in the old way. A handful of threshold earth is 3 pinches. 3 pinches is too much. 3 pinches opens a door wider than you can hold. We want a pinch. A pinch is a keyhole." "How do you know?" "Because I am the one who taught your mother the recipe, Nyra. Did you think she made it up alone?" Nyra stared at her. Cyan Graymore stood up. Her gray eyes held Nyra's for a long beat. "Your mother was smart," she said. "Your mother was the smartest wolf in 4 valleys. But she did not come into the world knowing the old names for the old sicknesses. Someone taught her. That someone was me. I taught her when she was 9 years old, and I was 15, and we both thought the world was going to be a long, easy thing. By the time she came east to me at 26, she had added more to the recipe than I had ever dared to. She was past me by then. But the bones of it came from our grandmother, and our grandmother's mother, and theirs, all the way back. You are not saving this pack tomorrow night by yourself, girl. You have a line of women standing behind you with their hands on the bowl. Remember that when you are shaking." Nyra could not speak. She only nodded. They went back. The Ashen pack was a different pack that afternoon. It was not a healthy pack. It was not a strong pack. It was a pack that had spent the morning watching its Luna die in the snow and its high beta be killed by one of his own men, and its alpha king come back from a sickbed to strip a rank in front of 40 witnesses. And now it had a second pack sitting in its yard with 23 fed wolves and 12 fed warriors. And it had an Omega girl who had been dragged barefoot through its snow 3 days ago, sitting at its king's right hand in the great hall. Nobody knew what to do with any of that. So they did the only thing a pack knew how to do when it had been broken open. They cooked. The Graymore had brought food. Not a feast's worth, but enough. Dried elk, wheel cheese wrapped in cloth, hard little travel loaves, 2 sealed jars of pickled root. Cyan's warriors laid it out in the yard and kept none of it for themselves. And it was the Ashen pack that ate, the Ashen warriors and the Ashen women and the Ashen thin children. And it was Olin the gatekeeper who carved the dried elk with his own knife because nobody else had the hands for it. And it was Bran's mother, a woman Nyra had not known was still alive, who brewed a thin birch tea in the big black kettle that had not been used since autumn. Nyra sat on the stone bench outside the great hall and ate a piece of cheese. She ate it slowly because her mother's voice was in the back of her skull saying slow, "Girl, slow. You have not eaten in 4 days. Your belly will turn on you." And she believed her mother. A small girl with a runny nose came and stood in front of her and stared at her for a long time with the shameless, unblinking stare of a child who has decided she has a question. Nyra had never, in 19 summers in this pack, had a child stand in front of her to stare. Children learned fast who to ignore.
"Are you the Luna's girl?" the child said. "I am Nyra. My mother says you are the Luna's girl, and that is why the eyes." "What eyes?" "Your eyes, the gold. My mother says she always said it when I wasn't in the room, and she was sorry now she did not say it in the room." Nyra did not trust herself to speak. The child waited a polite 3 seconds. Then, having decided Nyra was not going to answer, she said, "Are you going to save us?" "I'm going to try." "Are you scared?" "Yes. My brother was scared when he died." "I'm sorry. He was 8.
The child looked at her a moment longer, then nodded. The solemn nod of a 4-year-old who had asked her questions and been answered, and she wandered back across the yard to a woman who was watching from the door of the weavery. The woman, Nyra knew her vaguely as Ilva's daughter, a weaver called Marin, met Nyra's eyes across the yard and did something with her face that might, in a stronger light, have been an apology. Nyra looked down at the half-eaten cheese in her hand. "Eat," said Cian Greymore, sitting down beside her without making a sound. "Eat slow. You can cry while you eat. That is allowed." "I am not crying. I am looking at your face, Nyra." Nyra ate slowly. She did not, for a long moment, say anything. "Cian." "Yes." "What did my mother trade?" "For me to come." "Yes." Cian was quiet for a long time. She had her own piece of cheese in her hands. She was not eating it. She was turning it over. "You asked me, out there," she said finally. "Sabren said she traded you. You said, 'I know.' Did you know?" "No. I said that so he wouldn't see he'd landed one." Cian's mouth did the small private grimace. "Your mother," she said, "was a proud woman. And she was in a corner. She had a daughter she could not protect from a curse she could see eating the pack around her. She could not take you east herself. If she had moved, Kalor would have known. And if Kalor had known, Sabren would have known. And if Sabren had known, he would have moved early. So she traded a thing that would not be collected until the binding broke. She traded—" Cian stopped. She turned the cheese. "She traded your bond, Nyra, to me. She said, 'If my daughter lives long enough to break the binding, when it breaks, her first true bond will belong to the Greymore. She will not bond into the Ashen. She will not bond into any other pack. When her bond stands up, it stands up to us.'" Nyra did not move. "Why?" she said. "Because the Greymore keeps the old knowledge, and the old knowledge is dying, and your mother wanted the line to continue. Because if you came east with your mother's bark scrolls in your mother's ear and your mother's mouth, the old work would live another generation. Because the Ashen burned midwives out of their own threshold. She did not want the knowledge to die in the ashes of this pack. And you agreed." "I agreed. Without asking me. You were 3 years old, Nyra." "I am not 3 now." "No, you are not." Cian set the cheese down on the bench between them. She turned fully, and she looked at Nyra. "Your mother's trade," she said, "is a Greymore trade. A Greymore trade is binding on the promiser and on the Luna who accepted, but it is not binding on the promised, once the promised is grown. That is also old law. When you walked out into that meadow this morning and I put my hand on your face, the Greymore accepted you as a daughter of the line. We did not accept you as property. You do not have to come east, Nyra. If you wish to break the binding tomorrow night and then walk into the ashes of the Ashen Pack and sit at your father's hand and be their Luna, if you wish to be the woman who reteaches this valley how to feed itself, you can. The Greymore will honor that. Your mother would have honored that. I honor that. But you want me to come east?" "I want you alive," Cian said. "I want my sister's only daughter alive in a pack that knows her worth. I want the knowledge that ran down our line not to die in a valley that has done nothing but use up its women. I want a lot of things, Nyra. I am a woman in my 50s, and I have wanted a lot of things. But I will tell you now, so you do not have to wonder tomorrow. Whatever you choose, after the moonrise, I stand with it. Whatever it is. Do you hear me?" "I hear you. Eat the cheese, girl." Nyra ate the cheese. Kalor Virex was dying faster. She went to him at dusk. They had laid him, at his own insistence, back on the antler throne, propped up with cloaks, with a brazier at his feet, and 2 of the Greymore warriors standing as honor guard to his left, and 2 blades to his right. The great hall had been scrubbed, the old rushes taken up and burned, and new ones laid. The last stalk of dry sedge in the whole pack. The hall smelled of fresh grass for the first time in years. Kalor's hand on the arm of the throne was the color of candle wax. "Girl," he said, when she came up the 3 stone steps. His voice had a new sound in it now, a wet sound at the bottom of the breath. "Sit. Here, stool. Olin, get her the stool." Olin got her the stool. She sat at his right hand. "Tomorrow night," Kalor said. "Yes."
The recipe needs my blood. Yes. How much? She hesitated. She had been trying all afternoon not to think about that part. A bowl, she said finally. The scroll says a bowl. My mother's hand. A bowl of an old man's blood is the end of an old man, Nyra. I know. Good. He said it like that, flat, without drama. Kaylor.
No, don't. Don't do the thing where you tell me I might survive it. I have been dying on my feet for 5 years, Nyra. I would rather die tomorrow night in my own hall pouring out a bowl of blood that saved this pack than die in my bed in 3 days of a thing that is eating me for nothing. Do you understand that, daughter? Yes. Look at me when you say it. She looked at him. Yes, she said. His gold eyes crinkled, faintly. For a second she could see the 23-year-old in the old face, the one her mother had loved and then refused to marry because she had seen, better than he had, what was under his feet.
I was wrong about a lot of things, Kaylor said, and I am not going to use the last day I have listing them. I will only say this. I was wrong to let you be raised as an Omega in my hall and not claim you. I was wrong to let your mother die under her step without standing over the step. I was wrong to let Mayron get close to my ear when I was tired, because I was tired, and tired men take company from the wrong hands. I am sorry for all of it, separately, specifically. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am not even asking you to say anything back. I am telling you because it needs to be in the air before I empty it out of a bowl. Nyra did not answer. She put her hand instead on his wrist. He closed his eyes. They sat like that for a long time. In the small hours of the night, the Greymoor warriors and the Ashen warriors who had chosen the throne took turns walking the palisade, and Nyra slept for 3 hours on a pallet in the corner of the hall, and for the first time since she was a small child, she slept without flinching awake. She dreamed of her mother. She dreamed of her mother sitting on the threshold of the birthing hut in summer, hulling peas into her apron, and in the dream her mother looked up and saw her and said, "Well, look at you, girl. Look at you." And the dream did not resolve past that moment. She did not need it to. She woke before dawn. She lay on the pallet in the half-dark and listened to the hall breathe. Warriors sleeping in their cloaks, embers settling, the distant call of the first crow the valley had produced in 6 weeks, and she thought with a clarity that was almost peaceful. Tonight. At first light, she walked out alone through the gate. She did not go far. She went only as far as the edge of the meadow, where the snow was still blue and nobody was awake, and she sat on a log and she watched the sun come up through the black pines. The sun came up weak. It came up slow. It came up through a sky that was the color of skimmed milk and a cloud that was the color of iron. But it came up. She thought, watching it, this might be the last sunrise you see. She thought, so look at it. She looked at it. She was sitting like that, very still, with the cheese wrapper from last night folded in her pocket and the bark scrolls in the lining of her dress and Vessa's hunting knife on her belt, when Olin the gatekeeper came out and sat beside her without asking. He did not speak for a while. Then he said, "I want to say a thing to you, Luna." She twitched. "I'm not—" "You are," Olin said, flat. "Not in law yet, not officially, but the men in the yard are calling you that since yesterday afternoon, and I have not heard one of them corrected. Your father has not corrected it. Luna Greymoor has not corrected it. I am not correcting it, so I am going to call you Luna, if you will bear it for a minute." "All right, Luna." He turned this word over in his mouth, experimentally, like he was checking the taste of it. "Luna, I want to say, I stood at the gate of this hold for 31 winters. I was there the day your mother came up the valley the first time, a girl in a green cloak, with her basket. I was there the day she came down the valley the last time on a plank, with her eyes closed. I was there the day you were carried past me as an infant in your mother's arms, and I did not ask whose infant you were because I knew and I did not want to know. I was there 3 days ago when they walked you out through my gate to die in the forest, and I turned my face, Luna. I turned my face because I was afraid of Mayron, and I have had 2 nights to think about that now, and I do not forgive myself for it, and I am not asking you to forgive me for it. Olin, I'm asking to be allowed to stand at your shoulder tonight, in the hall, when you do the work. I'm asking to stand where I should have been standing when they walked you out. I have a good axe and a good arm for an old man, and I will put both of them between you and anything that comes through that door."
I am asking as an old man who would like, before he dies, to have done one thing right by your mother." Nyra did not speak for a while. She watched the weak sun touch the tops of the pines on the far ridge. "All right, Olin," she said, "stand at my shoulder." "Thank you, Luna." He stood up slowly, the knees of an old man in the cold. He set his hand briefly on her shoulder, and he went back toward the hold. She stayed on the log. And as she sat there, with the thin sun on her face and Olin's footsteps fading behind her, something happened to her chest. A small, quiet, warm thing. Not a flare, not a flash, just a thing that she had no name for until she had sat with it for a full count of 10. Then she named it. Being seen. She had been seen in the last 26 hours by her father, by her aunt, by a gatekeeper older than her mother. 3 people. It was a small number. It was not a pack. It was not a valley. It was not a crown. It was 3 people. But it was 3 more than she had ever had. She put her face in her hands and laughed once, a short, cracked laugh in the dawn meadow, and then she wiped her face with her sleeve and stood up, and she walked back toward the gate of the Ashen packhold with the weak sun at her back. And when Bran, the young warrior, saw her coming up the rise, he straightened, and Olin behind him straightened, and the 2 Greymore guards on the gate straightened, and it was not, she understood, a salute to an Omega returning from being cast out. It was a salute to a Luna walking home. She walked through the open gate, and the yard was already waking. Women were hanging pots. Children were being scolded. The black patch in the snow where Mehron had fallen had been covered over with fresh straw. The black patch where Vesa had fallen had been left clean and circled with stones, because some things a pack does not cover up. Someone had set a single pine bough on the stone. Sian Greymore was sitting on the steps of the great hall waiting for her. Sian did not rise. She only looked up, her gray eyes very steady. "It will be a long day," Sian said. "I know. You are ready?" Nyra looked past her, through the open doors of the hall, to the antler throne where her father was sleeping propped in cloaks, to the long shadowed aisle where tonight she would stand and do a thing her mother had planned for her when she was 3, to the cold fire pit in the middle where tonight at moonrise a new fire would be laid, and she thought about the bones under Vessa's floor, and the bark from the lightning-struck pine, and the pinch of earth from her mother's threshold, in a linen square in her pocket, and the bowl of salt in a sack by the hearth, and she thought about the bowl of blood that was not yet drawn, and she thought about the hollow binding, and she thought about Sabrin Vol sitting, even now, in the snow of the East Ridge, waiting for her to fail. "I'm not ready," she said, "but I'm going to do it anyway." Sian Greymore smiled for the first time. It was a small, private, sideways smile, and Nyra would remember it the rest of her life. "Good girl," Sian said. "That's how it's done." And she stood up, and she held the door of the great hall of the Ashen open with her shoulder, and Nyra Ashen, daughter of Orla, daughter of Kalor, Luna in waiting of a pack that had tried to throw her away 3 mornings ago, walked through the doorway of her own hall for the first time in her life as somebody the walls were willing to know. The day went fast and slow at the same time, the way days of that weight always do. Nyra spent the morning in the small back room behind the king's chamber, the one Vesa had called the quiet room when Nyra was small, and which in better years had been where the pack mothers did the careful work of birthing and laying out. It had a stone table. It had a smoke hole. It had one narrow window that looked east, toward the ridge where Sabrin Vol was, by all reports, still sitting. Nyra did not look out the window often. Sian Greymore worked with her. So did a Greymore woman called Tova, small and brown and quick-fingered, who had been an herb wife's apprentice in the East for 30 years, and who touched the bark scrolls with a reverence Nyra had never seen anyone give to anything before. Tova read every line of Orla's script twice, and then once more out loud, slowly, for Sian's ear. Sian corrected her on the pronunciation of 2 old words Nyra had never thought to wonder about. Venshar was not Venshar. It turned out the first syllable was meant to be almost whispered. Krell had an in-breath at the end, like a small door closing. Small things, tiny things. Nyra wrote them on the inside of her wrist with a bit of charcoal so she would not forget. The bones were there. Vesa had kept them under her floorboards for 7 years in a bag of oiled leather wrapped in linen older than Nyra. 4 small bones, shak. Not a whole skeleton, just the telling ones, the jaw, the 2 front paws, a rib. of an unmated wolf who had died in the second winter of the long cold, before the worst of it had come. Nyra did not ask whose wolf. Cian, watching her look at them, said quietly, "Your mother's." "My mother had a wolf."
Every herb wife in the old line has a wolf. The wolf is not kept. The wolf is kin. Yours died the year you were 9. Your mother did not tell you. She did not want you to carry it. I am telling you now because you are about to mix its bones into the unbinding, and the bones will work better if you know whose bones they are. Nyra sat with that for a minute. She remembered suddenly a cold day the autumn she had been 9, and her mother coming in from the yard with her sleeves wet to the elbow and her hands very steady, and her face, for the rest of that evening, set in a way Nyra had not understood. Her mother had not eaten supper that night. She had gone to bed early. Nyra had thought at the time it was one of her mother's headaches. It had not been a headache. "All right," Nyra said. "All right, thank you." The inner bark from the lightning-struck pine was laid out on a clean cloth. The pinch of earth from her mother's threshold, in its linen square. The salt, in a small wooden bowl. The pine pitch, warmed slightly over a candle that would bind them. The iron of a small knife. The black iron pot, not a bronze one, Cian was specific about this, the bronze gave a wrong taste to the word, that would sit at the center of the fire pit tonight. And a bowl. The bowl was the oldest object in the room. It had come from the graymoor in Tova's saddlebag. It was earthenware, dark brown, plain, with a hairline crack sealed up the side in a pale thread of old resin. It held about 2 cups. Nyra could not stop looking at it. 2 cups was not a killing amount of blood for a healthy man of Kaelor's size. But Kaelor was not a healthy man of his size. Kaelor was a man whose body had been eating itself from the inside for 5 years. 2 cups was going to be the end of him, and Nyra had known this since last night, and had told herself she had made her peace with it, and was finding out now, with the bowl on the stone table in front of her in the actual morning, that peace was a word she had used too easily. "Nyra," Cian's voice, quiet. He is going to do it. That is his choice, not yours. You are not killing him. You are holding the bowl." "I know." "Say it out loud." "I am holding the bowl. I am not killing him." "Again." "I am holding the bowl. I am not killing him." "Once more." "Cian, once more, Nyra." "I am holding the bowl. I am not killing him." Cian nodded. Her gray eyes were wet in a way she did not acknowledge. "Good," she said. "Keep saying it. When the blood goes in, say it. When the fire goes up, say it. When you feel the curse turn its head and look at you. And it will look at you, girl. I want you ready for that. Say it. The words will hold you. Do you hear me?" "I hear you." At midday, she went to see her father. He had been moved off the antler throne, because the throne was not somewhere a man could rest, and had been laid instead on a long pallet in the king's chamber with Olin and one of the blades at the door. He was awake. He was propped on 2 pillows. His hands, folded on his chest, were so thin the knuckles made shadows. But when Nyra came in, he lifted his chin a fraction, and the gold in his eyes was still the gold from the stories, and he said, weakly, "There she is. Here I am? Sit." She sat on the low stool at the head of the pallet. "Are you ready?" he said. "No." "Good." Nobody who's ever done a hard thing well was ready to do it. The ones who tell you they were ready are liars. I was not ready to put my hand in Sabrin's 26 winters ago, and I did it, and I was wrong. You are not ready to put your hand in a fire tonight, and you are going to do it, and you are going to be right. The difference is in the intent, not the readiness. Kaelor. Yes. I don't know how to be what they're already calling me. Luna, you mean? Yes. He was quiet a moment. Your mother, he said, was never the Luna of this pack. Never officially. Not on any scroll, not at any feast, not in any room where I could stand up and say the word. And yet every woman in this valley who had ever given birth or buried a child or lain awake waiting for a hunt knew your mother was the Luna of this pack, because your mother was the one who came when they called. That is all the office is, Nyra. It is not a crown. It is answering when people call. That is the whole thing. You have been answering when people called since you were 12. You just did not know you were allowed to have a name for it. I failed a lot of people.
You washed cloaks for them. I mean, you were a child, Nyra. You were a child in a pack that did not feed you and did not see you and beat you when it was tired, and you still kept your mother's scrolls sewn into a dress for 7 winters without telling anyone. And you still walked back into the gate of this valley with a knife in your cloak and a plan in your head, and you still said the word in this hall that every other wolf in it had been too afraid to say. You failed nobody. You are failing nobody. The only thing you have ever failed to do is believe a single kind word anybody told you, and you have not had many to work with, have you? She did not answer. She had no answer that would not have embarrassed them both. Do one thing for me, Kalor said. What? When it is done, if it is done, do not spend any part of the rest of your life being the girl who was thrown away. I see you doing it already. I see it in your shoulders. You are going to walk into the hall tonight, and part of you is going to be walking into it to show Mayron he was wrong. And Mayron is already dead in a pit. Nyra, he is not worth a step of you. Walk into it for the woman with the little girl who came up to you in the yard. Walk into it for Olin. Walk into it for the child you are going to have someday who is going to ask who her grandmother was. Don't waste a night this big on the people who threw you out. They are already too small to stand in the room. Nyra looked at her hands. I'll try, she said. Good. Now come here. She leaned down. He lifted one shaking hand and put it, flat, against her cheek. His palm was so cold it was almost warm, the way the deep cold starts to feel, and she understood without needing him to say that she was not going to have many more of these. I have not been your father, he said. Not in any way that counts. I'm not going to use the word tonight to cover it up, but for what it is worth, daughter of Orla, I am proud of what you are about to be. Do you hear me? I hear you. Good. He let her go. She stood up slowly. She walked to the chamber door. At the door she stopped. She did not turn around. She did not trust her face. Kalor. Yes. When the bowl fills, I'm going to be the one holding it. I know. I need you not to look at me while it fills. All right. Look at the fire instead. All right, Nyra. Thank you. She went out. The pack spent the afternoon making the hall ready. They moved the long pallet benches out of the center. They swept the floor down to the flagstones. They built the new fire in the central pit. Pine first, then oak, then a stacked ring of lightning wood at the heart. And they did not light it yet, because the lighting of it was Nyra's to do at moonrise. They set the iron pot at the center of the cold pit on its iron tripod. They laid a circle of salt around the pot, a thin line, because the scroll had set a thin line. Thick lines locked things in, and they did not want the binding locked in. They wanted it let out. Women came in with clean cloths, clean bowls, clean linen. Women who had not looked at Nyra in 19 years except to scold her came in carrying things and set them down at her elbow and straightened slowly, and a few of them, not all but a few, let themselves meet her eyes for a second before going out again. Marin the weaver came in with a folded gray cloak over her arm and laid it on the stool beside Nyra's seat. It was my mother's, Marin said. Pack Mother Ilva. She died last autumn, and I had it in a chest. I thought, if you wanted, for tonight, for standing, not for doing, for standing. Nyra looked at the cloak. It was plain gray wool, heavy, unadorned, except for a small dark blue band along the hem that had once been the color of the Pack Mother's office. It was not a crown. It was not a ceremony. It was a dead woman's cloak, given by a living woman whose brother Nyra had watched die by starvation 3 winters ago. Thank you, Marin. Luna. Marin turned and walked out of the hall with her hands folded in front of her apron, and Nyra sat with the cloak on her lap a long time. The sun went down slowly. Nobody rushed it. The pack gathered in the hall in ones and twos from dusk onward. Warriors, old men, women with babies in slings, children clutching at skirts. Nobody spoke loudly. The fire pit sat cold at the center, waiting. The iron pot sat cold on its tripod. The salt lay in its thin circle. The bowl, the earthenware bowl with the resin crack, sat on the small table beside the fire, empty, its mouth dark. Cyan Greymore came in and took a place at the wall. Her 12 warriors ranged themselves along the walls, also, black and silver, quiet. Her 23 wolves were at the gate, not in the hall. A wolf in a ritual hall fought the work. That too had been in the scroll. Olin the gatekeeper came in. Bran came in. The twins from the North Lodge came in. Hale, the former Beta's man, now an unranked warrior nobody had yet put anywhere, came in and stood at the back, alone, with his shoulders hunched as if he was not sure he was allowed. And Nyra, from her seat by the fire, caught his eye and nodded once. He straightened a fraction. He did not leave. They brought Kalor in last. 4 men carried him, on a new pallet. They set him down on the dais at her right hand, not on the antler throne, but on a lower seat prepared for him. A cushioned chair so he could sit upright without having to hold himself up. He was dressed in a clean black tunic. Someone had washed his face and combed his hair. He looked, in that cleanness, much closer to the statue of the stories, and much further from the man on the pallet at midday. His gold eyes found hers across the 3 paces between their seats, and he gave her the smallest possible nod, and she gave it back. Sian Greymore walked to the center of the hall. "The moon is up," she said. Nyra stood. She let Marin's mother's cloak fall over her shoulders. It was heavier than she had expected. She walked down the 3 stone steps of the dais to the fire pit, and she knelt at its edge, and she took the flint and the steel from the stone at her knee, and she struck. The first strike took. The pine caught. The oak caught. The lightning wood at the heart caught slowest, but when it caught blue for a moment, a pale, cold blue. And all through the hall, people made small, involuntary sounds without meaning to. She rose. The bones went in first, jaw, paws, rib, into the iron pot at the center of the fire, on their bed of lightning-struck bark. The fire took them. They did not burn fast. They blackened, slowly, and gave off a faint, sweet smell that Nyra remembered with a small shock from her childhood. Her mother had burned something like this once, in the autumn of the year Nyra had been 7, and had not let Nyra in the room while she burned it, but the smell had come out through the cracks of the door. The salt went in next, a careful handful cast across the top of the pot in a sweep of her hand. Not poured, scattered. The fire hissed as it met it. The pinch of threshold earth went in from the linen square. She did it with her fingers, not with a spoon. Cyan had been firm on that. The pine pitch went in last. A scoop. It sputtered and went quiet. Then she took up the bowl. She walked the 3 paces to Kalor's chair. He lifted his left hand toward her. It was steady. Whatever was going to fail in him tonight, it had given him this last gift first, a steadiness in the hand that mattered. She did not speak. He did not speak. He turned his wrist up. She laid the bowl in his lap, under the wrist. She took Vessa's small hunting knife from her belt, because that was what they had agreed. It had to be a knife that had lived in the pack, not a Greymore blade. The scroll had been clear. And she set the edge of it against the inside of his forearm, above the wrist, where the vein ran close to the skin. She looked at his face. He was looking at the fire, as she had asked. "Kalor." "Yes, I am holding the bowl. I'm not killing you." "I know, daughter." "Say it with me." "You are holding the bowl. You are not killing me." Again. "You are holding the bowl. You are not killing me." She drew the knife. The cut was clean and quick. The blood came fast. It came into the bowl in a dark thread, and then in a slower, steady trickle, and Nyra knelt at his knee and held the bowl and watched it fill. She did not look at his face. She watched the fire. She said under her breath the way Sian had told her to, "I am holding the bowl. I am not killing him. I am holding the bowl. I am not killing him." And the words became a small shape she was standing on, a stone in a river, and she did not get washed off it. Kalor's hand, which had been steady, began to shake after a while. She did not look up. She did not look. She felt him shake. She kept the bowl under his wrist. The blood rose slowly up the inside of the earthenware, past the hairline crack. It passed the crack. It kept going. When it was a little over halfway up, 2 cups, Sian had said, and 2 cups was a line about 2 fingers below the rim. Nyra took a long strip of clean linen from the stool beside her, and she pressed it, fast and tight, against the cut on Kalor's arm, and she bound the arm with a second strip, and she did it the way her mother had taught her when she was 11 to bind the butchery boys when they cut themselves on the knives. She did it without looking at his face. Then she lifted the bowl. She stood up. She walked back to the fire pit. The pot was glowing now, not red but a dull white at the bottom, the fire under it running too hot. The bones in it had gone to a soft gray ash. The The bark was curling black. The salt had melted into a thin crust on the hot iron. The air above the pot was shimmering the way it did over a hot road in summer, except there had been no summer in this valley in 4 years. Nyra tipped the bowl. The blood went into the pot in one long pour. The pot screamed. That was the only word for the sound. It was not the hiss of liquid hitting hot iron. It was a long, single, rising note that came out of the iron and the ash together and kept going, climbing, until the whole hall was full of it, and then, at the very top of it, when Nyra thought her ears would give out, it changed. It changed into a word. She did not know the word. Nobody in the hall knew the word. It was not a language of men. It was 3 syllables, long and hollow and old, and it shook the rafters and it shook the stones under the rafters, and Nyra felt, through the soles of her feet, the thing under the mountain finally wake up fully and turn its head to look at her. That was the part her aunt had warned her about. "It will look at you, girl." She had thought she was ready. She was not ready. What hit her, in that moment, was not pain and not cold. It was a weight. It was as though a hand the size of the whole valley had reached up through the stone floor of the hall and laid itself on the top of her head and pressed slowly down. Her knees tried to fold. They did not fold. Olin was at her right shoulder. Hale had come from the back of the hall and was at her left, and she had not seen them come. But when her knees tried to go, both men caught her under the arms without a word. And Olin said very close to her ear, "Luna, stand. Stand, girl. Stand." She stood. The pressure on her head was something she could feel under her skull, like a shape. It was trying to find the place in her where her bond was. It was rooting for it, the way a pig roots for something under leaves. And Nyra, who had been called bondless for 19 years, who had been thrown into the snow 3 mornings ago because no one had ever felt the pull move in her, discovered that her bond was very much there, and that it was a bright new live thing sitting just behind her sternum, where Cyan's gray eyes had put it when she had met Nyra on the meadow yesterday morning. And the thing under the mountain was going to eat it. She understood, with a clarity that was almost calm, that if she let it eat her bond, she would die, and the pack would die, and the binding would seal back up over the valley like skin over a wound that had not been cleaned, and Sabrinval would be down the east ridge by dawn to collect whatever was left. She understood a second thing, a heartbeat later. The scroll had not said she had to protect the bond. The scroll had said an Omega's hand mixed the ritual. The scroll had said, on the second-to-last line in her mother's smallest handwriting, the line Nyra had read 20 times and never quite understood, "What the bound one borrowed, the unbonded one returns." Return. Not protect. Return. Nyra closed her eyes. She took the bond, the new live thing behind her sternum, the thing her aunt had given her without permission and then released to her, the thing that had been waiting in her for 19 years and had, in the last 36 hours, become hers. And she did not shield it. She held it out. She pushed it, deliberately, forward, into the weight on top of her head. She said in her mind, not in any of the old languages, but in her own plain tongue, "You want what my father borrowed. Here. Here is a bond. Take it. It is clean. It is new. It is worth more than what he gave you. Take it and go." The weight on her head stopped pressing. It took her bond. It did not take it gently. She felt it rip out of her like a tooth coming out of a jaw, and she made a sound that was not a scream, not quite, more the sound a person makes when a bone breaks in cold weather. Her knees went fully this time. Olin and Hale held her up. The pot was still screaming the old word. The lightning wood was still burning blue. The whole hall was leaning toward the fire pit, as though the fire pit had put on weight in the last 10 seconds and was bending the room toward itself. And Nyra, in Olin's and Hale's hands, hanging between them, felt her chest where the bond had been and found it empty and warm and aching, the way a mouth aches in the first minute after a tooth is out. She thought, it took it. She thought, it is not enough. She thought, of course it is not enough. 26 winters is not one bond. It wants more. And as she thought that, she felt it begin to reach past her, into the hall, for the next bond. Not her father's. Her father had none left to give. The thing had already eaten all of Kalor Virek's bonds long ago. That was why he was dying. The next nearest bond was Olin's,
Olin had a wife. Olin had had a wife for 39 years. His wife was in the hall, standing against the north wall, watching her husband hold up the Luna, and Nyra felt the thing in the pot turn its head toward Olin the way a dog turns its head toward a piece of meat somebody has left on a low table. "No," Nyra said out loud. Her own voice surprised her. "No," she said louder. "No, you do not get another. You got mine. That was the debt. That is the whole debt. You go now." The pot screamed higher. "Cian," Nyra said, without turning her head, because she did not have the strength to turn her head. "Cian, the second line. Say the second line." From the wall, Cian Greymore's voice came, clear and low and absolutely unshaken. "Ven Shar, Krell, returned in full. The bond is returned in full. The debt is void. The door is shut. Go home, old thing, go home." The pot screamed once more. Then the scream broke. It broke like a wine glass, a high, clean crack, followed by silence. And the blue fire at the heart of the lightning wood flared white for one breath, and then it was just a fire, a normal fire, yellow and orange, sitting in a pot on a tripod in the middle of an old hall. The weight on Nyra's head lifted. The pressure under her feet, the low, deep hum she had felt through the stone of the floor, the thing she had realized last night had been present under every step she had ever taken in this valley, went quiet. The hall was very still, and from outside, through the open main doors of the hall, came a sound Nyra had not heard in 4 years. Dripping. She did not understand it for a second. Then she did. It was melt. The eaves of the hall were dripping, the icicles along the smokehouse, the frozen crust on the palisade logs. Somewhere in the yard, a chunk of old compacted snow slid off a roof and hit the ground with a dull thump. The air in the open doorway moved, and it moved warm. Not summer warm, not yet, but above freezing, above the line that snow crossed to come down as rain, a thing the Ashen Valley had not had in 4 winters. Somebody in the hall, a woman near the back, started to cry. Somebody else, a man's voice Nyra did not recognize, laughed once, a sharp, ragged laugh. And then a second man joined him, and then a child asked, loud enough to carry, "Mama, is the snow sick?" And the mother said, "No, pup, the snow is done." And that sentence went through the hall like the crack of a whip, and the whole room came undone at once. They did not cheer. Nyra would remember that later. They did not cheer. They wept, most of them. They held each other. An old man sat down on the rushes and put his hands over his face. A young woman began to laugh and could not stop. Bran's mother, who had been standing stiff as a post in her corner, slid slowly down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, and her hands went up over her mouth, and she rocked, once, twice. Olin and Hael lowered Nyra slowly to her knees on the flagstones. "Luna," Olin said. His voice was shaking. "Luna, can you hear me?" "I can hear you. Are you—" "I don't know." Hael's hand was on the back of her neck, holding her head up. "Luna, you're white as— I lost my bond, Hael. You— It's all right. I gave it on purpose. I gave it. It is all right." She was not sure it was all right. The place behind her sternum, where the bond had sat for 36 hours, was empty in a way that she could feel with every breath, a small, cold absence, as if she had swallowed a coin. But the hall was alive. Kaelor, on his cushioned seat on the dais, Kaelor was breathing. She could see his chest moving from where she knelt. He was breathing deep, for the first time since she had met him, maybe. His face had color on it, actual color, pink at the cheekbones. He was looking at her and weeping, the tears just running down his face without any of the shame a man of his rank should have felt about that, and he was not trying to wipe them. Cian Greymore came down from the wall. She knelt in front of Nyra. She put both her hands on Nyra's shoulders. "You gave it back," Cian said. "Yes. That was not in the scroll, not written out. The scroll said, 'Return.' Your mother wrote 'return.' Nobody has ever understood that line, Nyra. Not in 6 generations. Your mother wrote it, and your mother died before anyone could ask her what she meant. You knew. I guessed. You did not guess. You felt. There is a difference. Cian, I don't have— I know. It's gone. I know, Nyra. It will come back, not the same one.
A new one, in time. Your mother lost hers too once when she broke a smaller binding in the Greymoor when she was 21. It grew back. The bond is a thing that grows back in our line. It is one of the reasons we can do this work. You understand? I understand. Good. Can you stand up? Nyra tried. Her legs would not have it yet. Not yet. That is fine. Cian stood. She turned to the hall. The hall, which had been a mess of weeping and laughing and holding, slowly quieted around her. She let them quiet. She did not hurry them. When it was almost silent, she said, not loud but clear, "The binding is broken. The winter is ending. The Ashen Pack is free of its debt. The one who held the debt is gone. Go to your children. Go to your beds. Tomorrow there will be work. And the day after that, and all the days after that, because a pack that has starved for 4 winters does not become a fed pack in a night. But tonight," she let the word land, "tonight you may weep. Tonight you may laugh. Tonight the Luna of the Ashen Pack will rest, and none of you will disturb her, because she has given a thing for you that I will not put a name on out loud. Thank you, warriors of the Ashen. Thank you, women of the Ashen. Go in. They went slowly. They came past Nyra as they went. Not all of them. A few. Marin the Weaver passed and briefly laid her hand on the back of Nyra's neck without speaking. The old man who had sat on the rushes got up and bowed, stiffly, the bow of a man who had not bowed in a long time. The woman with the small girl came past, and the small girl looked at Nyra with the shameless, unblinking stare of yesterday and said, "You did it." And Nyra said, "I did, yes." And the girl said, "Good." And the mother put her hand briefly on her daughter's head and moved her on. After they were gone, only the dais party was left. Kylor on his seat. Cian and Tova by the fire pit. Olen and Hale at her shoulders. Bran at the doors. Nyra looked up at her father. "You're alive." "I am alive." "You weren't supposed to be." "I know." "Cian?" "Yes." The recipe said a bowl of his blood. A bowl killed him. It was supposed to. "Yes." "He's alive." Cian looked at Kylor. Kylor looked at Cian. They looked at each other a long time, like two people arriving at the same answer from opposite sides of a room. Then Cian said slowly, "Your mother wrote the recipe for a man with a full bond left in him. Your father has not had a full bond in him in 26 winters, Nyra. 2 cups of his blood was not 2 cups of healthy man's blood. It was 2 cups of the last thin thread of a man who had been eating himself, and when the thread cut, the eating stopped. The eating stopped because the binding broke. He will not recover the years he lost, but he is going to recover the years he has left. I did not think this was possible until a minute ago. Your mother, I think, did not think it was possible. You did a thing we did not know how to do. I didn't know I was doing it. That is how the best work is done, most of the time." They carried Kylor to his chamber. He protested, weakly, for form's sake, but he did not fight them. Nyra walked beside the pallet with her hand on the pallet's rail, not on him, because the cold place behind her sternum was still a new thing, and she was still figuring out how to walk with it. At the door of his chamber, he caught her hand. "Stay a minute, daughter." The blades carried him to his bed and went out. Olen and Hyle stayed outside the door. Cian left. The room was quiet. "Sit." She sat on the stool by the bed. "You gave up your bond." "Yes." "For a pack that threw you out." "Yes." "Why?" She thought about it a long time. She could have said, "Because you are my father." She could have said, "Because Vesa died for it." She could have said, "Because Olen's wife was next and I could not watch that happen." She could have said, "Because my mother wrote the scroll." But what came out of her mouth was the truth, and the truth was simpler. "Because they were scared, Kylor. I have been scared my whole life. I didn't want to leave 300 people as scared as I was. That's all." Kylor looked at her for a long moment. Then he closed his eyes. "Orla," he said quietly, "would be so proud of you." "I know." "I am proud of you." "I know. You will have to rule this pack, Nyra. You know that. I am not going to get up from this bed in any hurry, and when I do, I am going to be an old man who needs help getting dressed. The pack is yours. They are already calling you Luna. They will want a name on it tomorrow or the day after, or they will start fighting over who stands where. You are going to have to take it. I am asking you to take it. I don't want a crown, Kaelor. Then take one anyway. That is the kind of crown a pack needs. The wanting ones wreck the hall. She looked at him. All right, she said. All right, I'll take it. Good. But I'm going to change things. I would expect nothing less of your mother's daughter. Omegas eat first in my hall. That will cause talk. Let it. All right, Omegas eat first. And the law that says an unmated wolf past 19 may be cast out. That law is gone. Gone. And the midwife's hut is rebuilt. And the old knowledge is taught, not just to the girls with the gold eyes, all the girls. And the boys, if they have the hands for it. Nyra, yes. You have been the Luna of this pack for about 40 minutes, and you are already making my head hurt. Good. He laughed. It was a weak laugh, a half laugh, but it was a real one. It made her for a second see the man he must have been at 23 before he had gone down into the crypt with a knife and a stranger and an idea. Go sleep, Nyra. I will. One more thing. Yes. When you walk out of this chamber, you walk out Luna, from this minute forward. Do you understand? I understand. Good. Walk out then. She stood up. She bent once and laid her forehead briefly against his, the way her mother had laid her forehead against hers when she was a child running a fever, and his hand came up weakly and cupped the back of her head for a second, and then she walked out. Dawn in the Ashen Valley came up slow and strange. Nyra watched it from the open doorway of the great hall. Olin was with her, and Hale and Sian. The yard was wet. The snow in the yard was slumping visibly, melting from underneath as much as from on top. The gate was open. Outside the gate, in the meadow, the black pines were shaking snow off their branches in slow, heavy thumps as the night's warming reached them. Sabran Vol was not on the east ridge anymore. A Greymore scout had come down in the dark to say so. The camp on the ridge was abandoned. The metallic men were gone. There were no tracks out. They had simply, in the hour the pot had screamed, not been there anymore. He'll come back, Hale said quietly, staring at the east ridge. Not in our lifetime, Sian said. Not to this valley. He feeds on bound packs. This one is not bound anymore. He will go where there is another debt to eat. There are other valleys, Hale. There is other work for our line to do in time, but not this year. This year, we rest. Will there be another one like him? Nyra said. There are always others. There are always debts. But you know the shape of them now. You will teach your daughters. They will teach theirs. That is the work. Nyra watched the sun come up. It came up clean over the east ridge. A real sun, not the sick gray smear of yesterday morning. The meadow went gold under it. A crow called from the pines, then a second crow, then a third, and the crows were real crows, loud and stupid and alive, and the valley answered them back with its waking up noises, a baby crying in one of the lodges, an axe chunking into cordwood somewhere behind the smokehouse, a woman calling a man's name. Cyan Greymore stood beside her. What will you do? Nyra said. I will go home. Not today. In a week. When the thaw is set and your pack is fed and you are on your feet. I will leave Tova here, if you want her, to teach the herb work. I will come back in the summer. We will talk about the old line then. You do not have to decide yet, Nyra. Nothing about you has to be decided yet. A whole life is a long thing. Sian. Yes. Thank you. Your mother would have wanted it. I'm not a sentimental woman, but I am a sister. That is still a kind of thing. It is, Nyra said. It is a kind of thing. She stood in the doorway a long time after Cyan had gone back inside. Olin stood at her shoulder. Hale stood at her other shoulder. They did not speak. She did not need them to. Below her in the yard, the pack was starting its day. A man she did not know, a warrior from the West Lodge, by his cloak, came across the yard and stopped in front of the doorway and looked up at her, and for a moment she thought he was going to say something formal, a Luna and my service kind of sentence, and she braced for it. He didn't say that. He said quietly, My daughter has not eaten a warm meal in 4 days. We have broth on. Would you come eat some? Luna, if you would. If you... Nyra looked at him. He was maybe 40. He had a red beard going gray at the corners of the mouth. He was not one of the men who had saluted her in the yard yesterday. He had been in one of the knots that had not moved when Vesa had fallen. His face now had no pride in it, and no shame either. Just the plain ask of a man who had a hungry child and a pot of broth and a new Luna he wanted, for some reason, to feed first. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would come eat some broth. Thank you." She walked down off of the step of the hall. She walked across the melting yard with Olin and Hael 2 paces behind her and the sun warming the back of her neck for the first time in her life that she could remember. And the warriors at the gate saluted her as she passed, and the children stared at her without fear, and the women looked up from their pots and, one by one, nodded, not deeply, not as to a queen, but the small practical nods of women acknowledging another woman who had come to share a bowl. She ate the broth in the red-bearded man's lodge, sitting on a low stool with his small daughter on her knee for the last half of it, and when she set the empty bowl down on the packed earth floor, the child said, "More?" And Nyra said, "If there's more for everybody, more. If there's only some, no, then your mother eats." The child nodded seriously, as if that was a rule she had already known, but was glad to hear out loud, and she climbed down off Nyra's knee and went and stood beside her mother at the fire. And the mother put her hand on the top of the child's head and did not look at Nyra, but did not have to. Outside the lodge, the eaves dripped steadily into the mud. She had been nothing 3 days ago. She had been hands that scrubbed and a mouth that did not speak, and a body that was meant to die quiet in a snowbank so that 40 warriors would not have to watch it starve. She had not been given a name that was spoken indoors. She had not been touched by anyone who was not correcting her or hitting her for the better part of 7 years. She was still herself. She had not become a different girl. She was still hungry and still tired, and the cold place behind her sternum where her bond had been was not going to fill up for a long time. And she had a toe on her right foot that was probably going to have to come off, and her father was going to die sooner than he deserved, and not as soon as he had feared, and her aunt had gone back to the Great Hall and was, even now, negotiating over her head about what the old line was going to mean in 10 years. And somewhere east of the peaks, something very old had turned its head away from this valley for now, but had not died, because things like that did not die. None of that made her stop eating the broth. None of that made her stop holding the small daughter of the red-bearded man who had not been brave enough yesterday to stand with the throne. That was the lesson. That was the thing she would tell her own daughters, later, if she had them. You do not save the people who deserve to be saved. You save the people who are there, because they are there. You do not measure strength by who has the loudest howl in the yard. You measure it by who answers when somebody calls in the dark. You do not spend your life proving the people who threw you out were wrong. You spend it on the ones who, when they are scared, look at you and ask, "Is the snow sick?" And need the answer to be no, pup? No, the snow is done. That afternoon, in the great hall of the Ashen Packhold, under a sun that was melting the icicles off the rafters one by one, Kalor Virex, Alpha King, rose weakly from his bed, was walked by 2 blades into the hall, and laid, with his own thin hands, a circlet of plain iron, the old Luna's circlet, the one his sister Vesa had worn for 40 years and had kept in a chest, onto the dark hair of his daughter. He did not make a speech. He was too tired for a speech, and the pack had been through enough speeches for 1 season. He only said quietly, so that most of the hall had to lean forward to hear him, "Her name is Nyra. She saved you. She saved me. She did it with her mother's words in her own hands. Call her what you are already calling her. I am done." He sat down, and the pack that had, 3 mornings ago, cast an Omega barefoot into a blizzard to die quietly under a frozen pine, knelt, in its thawing hall, to the same girl they had tried to forget. They did not forget her again. None of them. Not in that lifetime, and not in any of the lifetimes that followed, in which the daughters of the Ashen Valley learned from mothers who learned from grandmothers that the strongest thing in a pack is almost never the one standing at the front of the yard shouting. It is usually the one in the back, with cracked hands, holding the bowl.